Yeah, like the Superboy, or like the Adventures of Superman annual is the one where they establish that Superboy like can get an IV if he's unconscious because he's not actually invulnerable. He's just telekinetic.
Right.
And it's like, okay, those are good details that show like they were like thinking about these things like at the very beginning of it all.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, like, despite how thick the return of Superman trade paperback is, it's like, well, it's probably only like 5 issues of each at most. Like they had to have the shit figured out already. But that's not what we're talking about today. So let's. Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Keith Lehtinen, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, J. Mike Folsom.
You know, one day I'm really going to have a better intro for these things. Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you. Well, it's never really creative. So I was like, I got to think of a more creative one next time.
Well, it's okay to have an absence of creativity in this time of mourning that we are in right now, since we are still in the process of reconciling our feelings about the death of Superman. We've experienced it in a bad animated movie, and then in the comics, and then in a really good animated movie. But now we are left to pick up the pieces of this shattered life and deal with a world without Superman, and to discuss the issues that are contained in the trade paperback world without Superman. We have someone who has issues himself. From the We Have Issues podcast, we've got Keith.
Hey guys, glad to be here. I will point out that Case, we've also discussed the death of Superman in a terrible live action movie, as well as a 4-hour remake of that terrible live action movie. So just making that clear.
That's true. If we want to go far enough back, we can go. So weirdly, like we still haven't done an episode on Man of Steel, but we have done Batman Superman, or Batman v Superman, I should say, and we've done Justice League. And so, of course, we were first introduced to you doing the Justice League Snyder cut.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, this is, I'll be honest, I haven't read these books in years, in a very, very long time, and it was kind of cool to go back.
Yeah, so we're talking about it's almost interesting that DC even bothered to do this. Like, so after the death of Superman, they had several issues, and like there's a lot of Superman books at this time. We've talked about this before. There's technically 5, although one I think launches. I think one launches with the return of Superman. So I guess it's 4 at this point. But that's still 4 books that were just like straight up crossing over every single month. You basically needed to be reading all 4 books to understand what was going on in any of them, especially when big things happened, like say your main character dies. So it's like 2 issues for each book, plus then like a couple like side stories that were included in this trade. But it's really interesting that DC even bothered to be like, all right, yeah, we're gonna have an issue where it's just like, oh shit, Metropolis is fucked up. Let's deal with collateral damage. And like, oh shit, like the Justice Leaguers are going to come together and like read Christmas cards that were sent to Superman and like all this stuff. It's like a wild like set of events when you really like stop to think about it, but it gets completely subsumed in terms of the zeitgeist by obviously the big fight that with Doomsday that kills him. And then immediately following this, we get the return of Superman, like the reign of the Supermen, like the 4 imposters that show up after, or like right after this. And honestly, you could skip this and like be fine, like you like in terms of like the big beats, like you get it. Like we all get it, right?
Yeah,
like there's even like a whole like snatch him away and then like return him to the grave kind of like story that like, you know,
it's a filler episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but it's interesting filler, and it's character filler, you know, like it's really interesting having time with like Lana and Lois hugging each other and dealing with the fact that they're both like experiencing the grief of Clark's loss. So that's really cool. They're like them kind of dealing with like, do we talk about the secret identity of Superman to the like larger world? That's cool. I like some time being spent with Supergirl, which is not, you know, what we would really be getting that much at this point in time. Like, you know, prior to this, really, Supergirl has always been like the main other member of the Superman family. Now, this is the weird Supergirl. This is Matrix.
I was going to say not the Supergirl I would have chosen, but sure.
Right. Yeah. it's a weird era for this character, but there's certainly a period where it's like, okay, Superman's gone, so Supergirl has to pick up the pieces. Like that's classic Superman story stuff. Like going back to like the not Just Imagine, that's the Stan Lee thing, the imaginary story where Luthor kills Superman and like Supergirl then like flies in and like has to take over for him. So there's definitely classic beats going on here. So much so that the issue of Action Comics that focuses on Supergirl is a direct homage to Action Comics #1.
Oh, the cover. I love that.
Yeah, on the cover. So, well, on the cover and actually in the events because she chases down a car. Like,
That's
so
true,
it
actually. Yeah.
It actually matches up fairly well in that regard. But so we're going to kind of talk through issue by issue because I think each one is trying to do like, okay, here's all the aftermath pieces before we get to the next story. And I think there's a lot of interesting things going on with it all. So why don't we pick up with Adventures of Superman 498, which is the immediate follow up to Superman Dead. And that is like literally them trying to figure out like, what are we going to do with the body? Like, can they even pick up Doomsday? Can they do all these things? Yeah. So there's a lot of emotion going on for the characters in this all. Like Superman is dead. They're trying to, I do appreciate very much them being like, is Doomsday dead too? Like there's a lot of fear about that one. Cause like we know that they died together in this fight, but like, as far as they know, it's like, wait, that thing just killed a lot of people and it is lying there. But is it done? And there's a few points where it like kind of moves.
Yeah. I liked how much of this issue was literally them trying to bring him back, finding ways to bring him back.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a 24-page CPR session is basically this whole issue. Pretty much, which I was like, this is great. Like they're just like, can we do this? And it kind of addresses a lot of questions people have about Superman, which I thought was kind of cool. Like, you know, we can't inject anything because we can't break his skin. I'm like, that's true. Like, It reminds me of the post Civil War story with Luke Cage, where he had a heart attack and they couldn't get in there and save him because his skin's impenetrable. Like, and I was like, yeah, that's really cool. So I had forgotten this whole issue had happened, by the way. I did read it at one point, but I completely forgot this happened until we reread it. So
yeah, I mean, it's such a follow up. Like, you know, it's Guardian trying to give CPR to Superman and being like, oh man, I can't even tell if I'm inflating his lungs at all because they're like so strong. And then them coming up with increasingly stronger things to try to like shock him back to life, to shock his heart back up, and how it just keeps on not working because like nothing's strong enough. And then like eventually they're like, all right, well, we've belted the paddles. Let's bring in, let's get a force field belt on and let's like set up like a supercharged reactor and go.
This kind of reminds me of I don't know if you remember Superman Returns, after he falls from like the stratosphere.
Oh yeah,
and they take him to the ER and they're like trying to like stick him with the needles and trying to resuscitate him, and it blows out the entire hospital's fuses. And I was like, oh, that's where they got it from.
Also, one thing that, because I'm not an avid Superman reader, I do read some Superman books pretty fervently, but this era I wasn't really into Superman. I forgot how gigantic of a supporting cast this character has.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, who? And I'm like, oh yeah, Gangbuster. I remember Gangbuster vaguely.
I had no idea who that guy was.
Like, and just like, and I know Guardian obviously, but then like all these guys, and I'm like, who is? And I had to keep like Wikipediaing names because I'm like, who's this? And I kept having to remind myself of some of them, and I was like, oh yeah, and yeah, that was very interesting. Yeah, this issue specifically drops you in the deep end with that cast.
And this whole book in general feels very much of here's the soap opera of Superman's supporting cast in a world without Superman. You know, like how are they all responding to his lack? And so it's good that we get this reminder of it all. I mean, we talked about how the comics are in a way feel like a victory lap of like, here's all the cool things that they had done with the character post Man of Steel. You know, like they had introduced a much more robust supporting cast. There's a lot of characters out there. There's a lot of things that are out there. They've managed to incorporate like the Jack Kirby stuff into like the modern era stuff. You know, like we've got a universe that these characters are living in and why Superman's important. So, and then with his absence here, now it's like, all right, now how do they see the world now that he's gone? Because not surprisingly, the big fight where we're mostly focused on Superman and his inner monologue, like we're seeing the world from his perspective. And now it's everyone else kind of looking at this. I had this thought when I was reading this issue, particularly when Gangbuster shows up, but it's not just about him. It's that it's almost like they had filled up Superman's world with like the B-list version or like knockoff versions of everything else out there.
Yeah.
Like Guardian is kind of like Captain America. Gangbuster is a Batman type vigilante. Like the world that he's existing in, he's so robust and so important that everything else like is just an orbit around them. And so in order for them to really take the spotlight, they need to not be part of the Superman world. And that's why Guardian has like gone off and been more of his own character in more recent years, especially like when Grant Morrison like decided to take the character and have him be like his own thing. And thus is more of its own unique property versus like here it's like, oh yeah, well it's this is the Captain America for Superman City and this is the Batman for Superman City. And then here are the Morlocks for Superman City and here's like all these like lesser versions.
I do not recollect those Morlocks at all, and I was like, what are the Morlocks doing here? Like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's exactly that being written by Louise Simonson.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
I like some of the details in here. So like for one thing, J. Mike, you might recall this that when we did the radio show, we were talking about the character of Inspector Henderson, and we couldn't remember how involved he was in the actual comics. And he's all over this book, which I thought was like nice. I remembered him existing, but I did not remember that it was that same character. And like that's cool to establish like this, like the police that he's associated with, even if it's not quite as important to character as like a Jim Gordon. Like, oh yeah, in a world where you're fighting crime, got to deal with them at times. I like that we start to establish in this issue a connection between Dan Turpin and Matrix.
Yeah.
When he finds her really fucked up body.
Right.
I really like the fact that Dan Turpin in these comic series that we're reading about he's such a badass.
Yeah.
He takes no crap from anybody. He's such a badass. And
my one regret is that the redesign that occurred in the animated series where they decided to just make him Jack Kirby hasn't happened yet. So he's got a bowler and a receding hairline, but still like wonderful character. Mm-hmm. I love this idea of like a human that's just like, yeah, I don't care about superpowers. I'm going to take you down.
Yeah. That moment when he found Supergirl, I can't express to you because Case knows this. My favorite character in the super mythos is Supergirl. I'm a big Kara fan. And so when he found that body, I didn't remember because I haven't read Death of Superman recently like you guys have.
Right.
So I was like, wait, who was this? I don't remember. And then I was like, this sense of dread just dropping over me as I realized, oh, it's that era of Supergirl. Oh no. But yeah. So that moment was very interesting. But yeah, I did like.
May I guess that the moment hit you when Lex Luthor shows up to like pick her up?
Yes. When I was like, who's this guy? Oh no, it's Lex. Oh no, it's Lex Jr. No, right. no.
Also, I do love the fact that all the Lex iterations in all these books here we're reading, his hair got so much more tremendous in each iteration.
Yes, every issue it's just getting bigger and bigger.
It's more lush, it's curly, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's doing it there.
Yeah.
Great stuff. This issue also, I think, has the best page of the entire crossover, which is, it's not going to be a surprise. It's Mom, Pa Kent sitting there watching the TV. That one page.
Yeah. Anyone who is listening to this episode and hasn't looked at the episode art, that already picked out as being the central image for the episode art of the two of them hugging each other.
Mm-hmm. See, I didn't even know that. That's how awesome it is. So yeah.
Well, the art's not made yet. So I already like took the image to be for it. So because it's so perfect. And also this is where having Pa Kent is helpful from a story perspective. Like having him be still alive and having Ma Kent be still alive, like having both parents there so they can both be suffering in different ways is really good. And I love the shock because like, of course they're shocked that their invulnerable son is dead. Like, who wouldn't be? Like they must, you know, they were like, yeah, he can do anything and he can't be hurt. Like he's going to be okay. And they watched him get beaten to death on live television.
They're honestly, as we get into the rest of this, they're one of two hearts of the story for me in this entire thing. The other one being another character we see in this issue, which is Babowski. What? Like, I was like, who? And then I looked it up. I'm like, okay, I'm remembering this kind of. And then as I read through the whole crossover, I was like, I really like this character for some reason. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice having like different perspectives from like all over the place. And like, yeah, it's just this like guy who has a bar.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's the thing about the Superman mythos that like Superman being the prototype for comic book superheroes, like he can exist completely independent of every other super thing because it's just about like, yeah, like the world is so fucking weird because Superman's here, and it doesn't require other crossovers and other superheroes and all that. And it's nice to be reminded of just like how important the mundane people living in this world are, and like how this character has touched them and made them better people. Because like you get the impression that Bibbo would probably be like a bit rougher around the edges. Like at points he like tries to beat people up and then is like, no, Superman wouldn't want me to do that. Like it's nice getting those moments of like, yeah, Superman made an impact and made people better around him.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, if I took away anything from it, it's that I really liked that character and the way he developed throughout this. That was part of my favorite stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. We get back at LexCorp. Or like Lex Tower with him with a Supergirl convincing her to shapeshift back. Mm-hmm. And apparently she still has bruises and he's immediately like pouring wine for them because it's just like, all right, well, Superman's dead. and my hot chick is back. Okay, cool. Oh, you've got bruises, huh? Oh, you really took it. Side note, she took one fucking hit.
Yeah, it was like...
Like if you don't need to like go and find the issue. Like if you watch my Matrix video on the Superman analogs, I have that one panel of her just getting decked by Doomsday, and that's it. She's just done, and she turns into a pile of goo.
It's because she's a garbage Supergirl. Don't get me started.
Because they don't. Did they mention like the other heroes that met Doomsday first?
They don't in this, but I was actually telling Case because I read on the DC Universe Infinite app. They actually recommended Justice League of America number 70 to be the first thing I read. And it's an ancillary story for Funeral for a Friend, but it's not like numbered like the rest. And it is literally the Justice League's reaction and what happened to them. So like Blue Beetle's in critical condition with swelling on his brain, and Ice is very heavily featured throughout the entire issue, just crying the entire time, which is crazy. We got Booster Gold with his entire costume ripped off, looking like Kazar from the Savage Land. Like it's, but the best part of the issue, and I recommend reading it because my boy Guy Gardner is the Green Lantern in the Justice League at this point, and he's just like, big deal, Superman died, whatever, and everybody's like, screw you, man. And so, but at the end, they all put on the Superman armbands, like the honorary armbands with his symbol on it, and you see Guy Gardner using his ring to take one when no one's looking. Like, it's a really cool moment. Like, I like that. So,
that's good. Yeah, I'll have to check out that issue because I've never read that immediate issue. We were even joking when we were reading the comics. It's like, can you imagine if you only were reading Justice League and no other book? So.
Yeah, because that's when the Justice League falls apart, I want to say. And then they, I want to say they reform with a new lineup because they got so wrecked by this fight that's when they rebooted. Yeah. So it's literally the last issue of that group. So, yeah.
So then we deal with different people wanting to do different things with everyone's bodies, including Cadmus showing up to try to take away Doomsday.
Cadmus.
I like that they note that they have anti-grav discs underneath Doomsday to try to make him levitate, which just adds to like the super science, but specifically like Kirby-esque super science. Like those anti-grav discs are like right out of like everything he was doing over there, which is just great. And for you guys might not. So they remind us of who the director of Cadmus is at the time, which is Paul Westfield, who is he's just another one of these like bureaucrat bad guys. And so I have complicated feelings about Paul Westfield because I think he's very important to a character, and then that importance was completely ripped away by what could have been a good story, but instead it was a poorly written story. And that is that Paul Westfield, in his capacity as head of Cadmus, uses his DNA as the basis for the clone that they try to make, that they then modify to have Kryptonian style features, which is Superboy. And then years later, Geoff Johns, apparently having never fucking read any of Superboy, was like, well, what if he was just Lex Luthor and Superman's son? And like, that could have been fine, but they kept on being like, you know how you never knew who your genetic donor was? And it's like, no, we've known for a long fucking time.
It's like, no, like, yeah,
that was never even a mystery. It's like, it's resolved like within the first year of the Superboy book. In fact, I have the annual sitting behind me right now.
Yeah, I vividly remember that retcon, actually. Like, it's like, yeah, that happened. What? No, it didn't.
And it could have been fine. Like, I think it's great on Young Justice. I think that works really well there.
Yeah.
But like, they had done a lot with the whole thing. There's a whole thing about how, because Superboy was technically human, because no one was allowed to be Kryptonian at the time, he was someone you could clone, so you could do stuff with his DNA, and like, it was really interesting. And instead, they got rid of it. I'm going to vent about that in another time, because we're not even talking about Superboy at this point. But Paul Westfield is a douchebag. I forget if he's being manipulated by Dabney Donovan at this point, but he's definitely replacing Dabney Donovan in terms of being like the bad scientist character, even though he's a suit controlling it all.
Right.
So he's just a shitty dude. And he wants everyone's DNA so that he can, run his DNA farm and make cool copies. And everyone's like, hey, no, don't fucking touch that guy. And it gets violent real fast. Like, you would think like they would just do what they do later in this book and never even bother like trying to have a confrontation about Superman.
Right.
Just be like, no, we're gonna take the biological waste and you deal with the hero, and that's fine. Yeah. But he gets to be sexist and homophobic, I think, to Maggie Sawyer. And then Turpin, who is just awesome and a true ally.
Yeah.
Just decks it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
He's the man.
It's like, you want my badge number? Here's my name. It's Turpin. And like,
yeah, I like that. It does set up this whole arc, obviously, and literally everything that's going to happen is set up in this issue. So this issue did a really good job, because that was its job. Set up what we're going to talk about during the funeral, or the death of, or the funeral for a friend part of it. So yeah.
All the plots are set up in this issue, even though like really all they're doing is just trying to resuscitate Superman. And the end of the issue is they fail. So effectively, this is all just the minutes after Superman dies. Mm-hmm. I love that we have Bibbo show up with Email Hamilton with the like power converter that then one of like the Lextrons are going to use, and they're going to have the force field belts that they've established have been around for a while, because Superman was using those when he lost his powers in the Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite. And we've got like the Lex guards that were like shooting them. There's only one still functional, so he's going to use its like laser blasters. I don't understand why it's laser blasters and not just like plug it into the battery.
That's what I thought they were going to do, but like,
isn't there some loss of energy somewhere in the process? But I thought it was clever. It's like, okay, anything strong enough to shock Superman is going to fuck you up. So like, wear a force field up. Cool. All right. Let's have weird super science. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's have Kat Grant reporting on it live, because she's the TV reporter at this time. Like the late Bronze Age changes to Superman haven't happened in this setting. So Kat Grant is doing TV, but like Lois is not.
Yeah.
Nor is Clark.
Of course, yeah.
I love all the thoughts about people trying to be like, man, we're also upset about Superman, like just reminding us like that was the status quo for a really long time. And even if the Man of Steel era of Superman was trying to make him more like a traditional superhero Marvel type character with John Byrne's revisions and so forth, like he still has this rich world. Like he has so many people who are tied into it all, and it's kind of just nice to deal with it all.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm in addition to, like I said, setting up everything that's going to happen. I mentioned I didn't know who half these characters were, but by the end of this issue, I didn't have to look anyone up, because they'd already told me everybody who's going to be involved. I know every character. Okay, cool. Now I don't. The rest of the time I'm reading, I'm not having to go to Wikipedia, because you've already told me who's important to this story, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah. So next up, we are moving on to Action Comics 685, which is it's the big Supergirl issue, and it kind of picks up exactly where we were looking at before in terms of like, well, there's a standoff about Superman's body. Mm-hmm. They did not succeed in resuscitating him. No. We open with a page, though, that I do have a question, which is they have a picture of Superman lying dead and newspapers flying over him that's a doomsday massacre.
Don't get me started.
And I'm not clear, like, it was like 12 hours between Doomsday showing up and like everyone being dead. It's like, I don't know how they get those newspapers out there so fast.
The only way it could have been worse if it was the actual newspaper he was on. Like if it was a picture of the paper on the paper. A picture of him dead.
Well, I would love that even more though, because then you could keep zooming in on it.
That'd be hilarious. But yeah, I thought that was funny too.
So they set up the news of him being dead. We see the standoff between everyone. Maggie Sawyer's wearing a different outfit now, but, you know, whatever.
There were lots of little continuity errors that bother me. I think the first one happens in this issue, where in the first issue, Jimmy says, "I'll walk you home," and Lois is like, "I would like that." And in this issue, he's like, "Need a lift, Lois?" She goes, "Thanks, Jimmy, but I can find my own way." And I'm like, and it's important because what she does afterwards, she does do by herself. And I'm just kind of like, I know DC had a notorious thing where they didn't quite have a continuity editor to make sure things are quite just right with things like this. And it's minor things, but it's stuff I notice. And so I know they do that now. They're a lot better on, catching these things now. So I just thought that one jumped out at me kind of weird. I was like, wait, didn't he walk her home? And I'm like, is this the same day? What happened? So yeah.
No, like we literally know the person who's in charge of making sure of those things. Paul Kaminsky was on Another Pass.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I like the big focus on continuity editing and making sure things match up. Like it's really cool because it makes it, if you read everything like I do, it makes it a lot easier. So yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy the way Lex Luthor plays this all. I like him sitting in Supergirl and him playing nice with Supergirl as a way of getting like public opinion for him, because he understands that, like, for one thing, he's not Lex Luthor Sr. officially, and he needs to like sell that he is like friend to everyone. He's the best guy. He's cool. Like there's a bit of a Richard Branson going on with him.
Oh yeah.
Which is like, we get it. but he's trying to like play himself up as like the ultimate like altruist, like, yeah, no, I'm a billionaire. I'm a good billionaire, right? And I like that Perry White has no time for his bullshit. Like Perry White catches like the news report and it's just like, he sees right through that he's like setting himself up. He doesn't see through that he's like, that he is literally Lex Luthor Sr., but in a clone body, but he is able to observe like, no, I know the moves you're doing right here. Like it's nice that there are people who are not fooled by him, even though Superman kind of was prior to this. We get more Lois being super upset about everything because she can't even talk to people. And I like that detail. Like when she finally talks to Ma Pa Kent later on, she's like, I haven't been able to say what I am grieving about. I've just had to sort of like nod when people are like, are you upset because Clark is missing? Like, so I really like that kind of like thing that she's going through.
Yeah, she has to bury it, and she has to pretend she's not as upset as she is. And that's a really interesting line to walk, because she's still going to be upset because she knew Superman. People are going to expect her to be upset, but they're not going to expect her to be that upset. And I think that's cool.
Right.
She does do a really good job of walking that line. And it takes a lot of like mental toughness. Like that's really cool. So.
Right. And then we get Lana calling into the Kents, which is just a nice detail there. I really love the tradition of post-crisis Lana Lang knowing that Clark Kent is Superman. Like,
very much so.
I think that was a really good decision that was carried into the animated series and like has been done sometimes in other things since then. But like it was just really good here being like, yeah, no, we were not meant to be, but like still the most special person at that point in my life, and like still an amazing person that I can't believe I got to know. In that, from Lana's perspective, I mean, like
yeah, definitely. I do think that's. I like that she called them right away. Obviously, we'll find out why Lois didn't call them right away. We deal with that, but I do like that someone called them right away, and I think she's a great choice to be the one to do it, because she's the only other person who knows, really.
Yeah. We see the world reacting to Superman's death. There's one spot that caught me a little bit weird when Supergirl is like, or like Luthor's like, Supergirl will save the day, and we cut to, I don't know where, but it says translated from the Arabic, where it's like, just how this unveiled young woman can be expected to carry on Superman's stead remains unexplained. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I like how that was written.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably like, yeah, I have nothing. I got nothing to defend that.
I don't even know if it's technically wrong. It just feels wrong.
Yeah, I think that's because that seems to be the commentator, at least. Like, not Lex talking. I don't think it's
right. No.
So,
It's the news reporting on the situation.
When I first read it, I thought it was them mistranslating Lex, and I was like, oh, that's brutal. But then I was like, oh, okay, wait, it's him. And then, I mean, he could be, for all we know, like like an extremist, reporter. You know what I mean? Like the kind of ones we have. I don't want to get political, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So maybe that's it. I don't know. So.
Yeah, it just feels like weird.
It does feel weird though.
cut in there. It just stood out. That's all. So all I'm going to say is it stood out. We get Lex visiting the corpse of Doomsday and like breaking a chair over him, and in his head he's just like, "He was mine to kill. He was mine." And everyone's like, "No, Lex Jr. Don't. You can't be so upset. Like don't let your anger consume you because this thing killed Superman." It's like, "But he was mine to kill."
I love it.
It's a really interesting line that they're walking in terms of Lex Jr. of like keeping this character going who was so desperately putting on this facade of being a good guy. And like, we know as an audience that he is not.
Yeah. I mean, and it is interesting, and like, it's the kind of thing that we do see Lex do quite a bit. And we see people like Norman Osborn, constantly somehow redeeming himself and the public liking them. I'm like, they both have killed many people, and then they get elected president or something. You know what I mean? I think I always think that's funny. But obviously this one's a creative way to do it because, I'm not that Lex. I'm the son, and I'm making up for all the mistakes my father made. Like, yeah.
Yeah. We get Lois returning to Clark's apartment because, I mean, at this point they were engaged. And I do like one of the details of this is that they were right at that period. Like they were planning the wedding, like you feel like they had this wonderful story that got cut off by Doomsday. Like Doomsday deliberately, or not deliberately, but like interceded in their lives and shattered it in ways that don't follow the conventions of what they had been planning for. So I love that element that she's like trying to figure out even what feels comfortable. Like she's half moved into to Clark's place and vice versa. Like, cause that makes sense. Like my now wife, like for the first like 2 years that we were dating, like we basically had like full setups at each other's place because like she lived in New Jersey and I lived in the city. So like some days it made more sense to stay at my place, and sometimes we just liked having her much more spacious apartment because it was in New Jersey.
Right.
But I like that it calls out specifically stuff from the Man of Steel trade or from the Man of Steel miniseries. Like when she talks about the first time she came over, she's explicitly referencing that issue where she shows up and where we first meet Lex Luthor, where like she like is like eyeing all of his photos and talking about his weights and like it's calling back to it. I mean, it's not being if it was like a movie, you would do like a flashback shot or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe if it was a bad movie, you would do a flashback shot of it. But that's kind of what they're doing here. And I like that particularly because we just looked back at Man of Steel recently, or the Man of Steel, the miniseries, the comic, not
right.
Not the movie that hasn't come out yet.
God no.
I guess the comic was the Man of Steel,
right?
So that was cool. I like that Clark's apartment's always clean.
Yeah, of course it would be.
Doesn't take him any time.
Yeah, I like the immediate next page where we actually see the criminal element reacting.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I like it. I like it because Toyman is like, yeah, he messed with me, but I'm not going to celebrate losing him. That's really sad. And then immediately Parasite's like, fuck Superman. I was like, yes, that is my favorite.
Yeah, the only thing sad is I'm not going to be able to drink his sweet, sweet super juice.
I thought it was really great. And
and then different criminals are like upset because it's like, hey, Superman saved my grandma.
Yeah. I liked, this actually reminded me of something that I think is really interesting. Because it's Toyman, and I was looking at him, I'm like, wait, what year was this? And I had to look it up. It's 92. Yeah. And I'm like, man, 4 years. 2 years. How much the DC brand changes after this. And it's because of this event. If you really look at it, because of the way it sold, because of the impact it had, DC started taking these really risky, dark chances on a lot of characters. And Toyman becomes unrecognizable in a couple of years, basically.
Yeah. Well, and we saw one of the characters who's involved in that story is still alive at this point, which is Cat Grant's son.
Exactly, yeah. So that was kind of like, I was like, what was this, like 86? And then I went, I'm like, 92? This is the 90s?
Yeah, 92.
Yeah.
Like Nirvana impacted the entire like culture, changed everything. Just saying. No. But no, I really like that. I do like Parasite just being like not giving a crap. That's very funny to me.
Who cares? He's dead.
Yeah, then we get a sequence of Supergirl stopping some robbers, which is perfectly fine to be like, yeah, no, like no robber can really deal with someone who's as powerful as she is. We get reminded that she is telekinetic and is able to stop bullets from even hitting her and then redirect them. God damn, her powers are just fucking the Invisible Woman's plus like a little bit of shapeshift. It's Martian Manhunter is what it really is.
All
but, like,
over the place. Like, yeah.
What I thought Martian Manhunter was it Bloodwind? Bloodwind?
Yes, he's Bloodwind currently. Oh yeah, Jay Mike. So sorry. I told you he was Bloodwind. He's also Supergirl at this time.
He can't keep getting away with this. This is not right.
And then when Supergirl flies away, having solved the crime or stop the criminals, we get Bibbo looking up and like, that red streak. Nah, he's gone.
I actually like that panel of him, the Never Again He's Gone panel. That's a good face. I like that drawing.
Yeah,
like a lot. So.
Yeah, Bibbo's really dealing with it. Like he's in his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so much so that the issue actually wraps up with him, which I thought was a really cool touch. And that's kind of like right about now is when I started being like, do I care about this character all of a sudden? I was like, what's happening? And I really liked that issue, and Bibbo specifically. So yeah,
yeah, closing down his bar just to pray.
Yeah, very cool.
Which, very tangible. Like it makes a lot of sense. Like you have a person that you looked up to who was taken from you, and then you just don't understand it. And you have to like grapple with it.
Yeah.
So next up in the trade, I think this is the first of the short stories that are in the Superman. What is it? Remembering Superman,
Legacy of Superman,
or the Legacy of Superman. Yeah. And this is a Vanishing Point story by Dan Jurgens, featuring the character of Wave Rider, going back in time to the exact moment that Superman died and deciding that even though he really wants to save his friend, he can't. And I think it's interesting just to catch up on like there's a lot of weird shit out there in the universe at this time. Like like the Linear Men, which is like this group of like time cops that Booster Gold's not a part of, but it's Dan Jurgens. So they're all dealing with the same sort of ideas is going on there. Wave Rider is from the Millennium event. He's the one who like comes back in time and reveals that eventually Monarch is going to take over everything, and that it's supposed to be Captain Atom, but then editorial found out that everyone had figured it out and changed it to Hawk at the last minute.
Dumb. I loved that series, Armageddon 2001. I actually was a real big fan.
That was it. Sorry.
And I was like, oh, this is going to be really
Oh, Millennium was the Manhunters event. Yeah, sorry.
And it was called Armageddon 2001 and came out in 1991, in case everybody wants to be nice and confused. But I really loved that series, small tangent. And I was a big Hawk and Dove fan, specifically the male-female duo. I liked that Hawk and Dove. And man, that reveal was so lame. I got so upset and annoyed by that. So yeah, but yeah, I loved this because I since I was a big fan of that, I was like, Wave Rider, I love Wave Rider. So yeah, that was a really cool surprise actually.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like the Superman had become a pretty tied in character with the Linear Men, mostly because Dan Jurgens, again, that like one of his like little corners of the DCU that he has taken ownership of. Time is what he has taken ownership of. So it's kind of fun. It's nice. Like Wave Rider, I forget the name of the other character, and I'm skimming through too fast to like catch it. But it's just like him from a different timeline because that's just
because of that. Yeah,
was it Matthew Rider?
Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah. So it's fun being like, all right, so what do time cops do when big tragedy happens to people they know? And it's like, all right, well, we can't. Like, we could save him now, but then we'd have to save him again and then again. And like, what are we even like really doing here? And it's an argument for the status quo, which I get. Like, it's the thing that superhero comics have to grapple with just in general. And when you get into time travel, you have to grapple with it like even more so, because it's like the same problem that like the Legion of Superheroes always had, where it's like, yeah, we know the moment that you die because we're 1,000 years in the future.
Yeah, and it makes it difficult in some ways. Yeah, definitely.
But then we move on to Superman, the Man of Steel, issue 20, where we open up with some luscious locks of Lex Luthor.
It's glorious. So this is where I want to jump in because I was like, why do I love this book way more than the other two all of a sudden? And it's because I didn't realize it, but I should have known because it's written by Louise Simonson. And Louise Simonson's pretty much one of my favorite writers of all time. And the art is done by John Bogdanova, who does not get the credit that the Simonsons do, but partnered with them quite a bit, especially on Power Pack. And later in the next arc you guys are going to read, I'm assuming, with the creation of Steel. So I was like, wow, I really like this book. Why? I'm like, oh, it's because this is what I was reading when I was a kid. I was raised on the Simonsons. So yeah, I love this, but his hair is insane. I love it.
It's so big. It's just so crazy big.
And he's got this pouty look in one of the shots. I think it's the second page.
Bogdanov loves like lips.
Yeah, he's looking at Supergirl and he's like pouting at her, and it's fantastic. I love it.
So they're trying to arrange the funeral. Meanwhile, we cut to the Kents, who are not even able to go to the funeral,
which is so sad. Yeah. I mean, and I'll just say it for the rest of the show. The Simonson issues are the ones that stand out to me the most because I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And again, it's because it's what I was raised on. But specifically, like the character development in this one is really, really good.
Yeah, we talked when we looked at the death that Wheezy's run is most notable for like a lot of the people on the ground, like, and some of it is like particularly dealing with like social issues. Like we're most likely to deal with characters who are poor and like not in like good, fiscal status, like all the stuff with like the underground people, like that's all her, like actually being cared about, like what are the homeless like in Metropolis, like what are the people who are down on their luck like in Metropolis, like not just the people living in like fancy high rises or who are like working at this like hugely prestigious newspaper. And so and even the issues, like even this issue where we're like mostly looking at like people, like the funeral itself, it's all these like bystanders and onlookers and like dealing with their problems. Like we like we're not focused really on the Justice Leaguers walking in formation. We're focused on like the kid who's like was saved by Superman and dealing with that. We're people who like everyone has a story in this issue, like that, like why Superman matters to them or why he should have mattered, and like why they're a shitbag for not responding that way. Like the one kid who's like upset that his dad is no longer around, but his dad was like beating their mom. Like, and
even in that big group shot of the processional, like if you look at it, the crowd in the foreground is really the focus. They're not in the center, but they're significantly larger, a lot more detailed than the actual heroes. And I think that is reflective of what you're saying.
I am curious if there are a bunch of like DC writers or editorial in there. Like I don't know. I'm not saying there is, but I'm wondering. There's a lot of like white guys with beards that are drawn in this panel that feel like this might be a lot of people working at DC.
I would assume so, yeah. I do like the simple fact that unless I missed him, and I'm just double checking as we're talking, I love that Batman's not in the processional because he's doing something else, which we'll address later on. But that's so Batman. I really like that. But I think Disco Wings.
What a snapshot, by the way, for 1992 DC right there. Like, so some of those characters, you're like, of course, like Green Lantern and Wonder Woman, those all make sense. But then it's like you got the old school like Nightwing costume. Like you've got some characters like are just like fun additions, like the Forever People. But then there's like what is it, Wildebeest from the Teen Titans, like in the back there.
That big Geoforce with the big GF. I always forget that he had that. Like I'm like, girlfriend,
right?
Like But I like what you're saying. Like it deals with all the citizenry, and there's also a page with Lobo, and I'm just gonna say that was definitely Wheezy's idea. Let me just throw that on there. Like that sounds like something fun she would come up with. So I'm not a big Lobo fan, but it was a fun addition, I guess.
Yeah. So we get like more people who are just like upset about Superman being dead. Like a reference, there's the one kid who's upset or doesn't care that Superman's dead because Superman's the reason why their dad's not around, but the dad was the wife beater. But the little brother's really upset because the little brother is like happy for the mom that she's not getting beaten. Jesus Christ. And so he's being picked on by his older brother. And then another kid's like comes over and it's like, Superman would want me to like, again, it's like Superman is this like positive impact on people, not just by like saving their lives, but like by inspiring them to be better people. And this is like a reminder, like, yeah, and this message is being conveyed to these little kids. And it's such a sweet moment where it's just like, hey, I know you're going through a rough time and your brother's a douchebag. Do you want to hold my cat? Like, it makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Like, Superman is bigger than a person.
And then we have a terrorist who's about to bomb everyone, and Batman shows up.
See, because Batman is like, someone's got to watch out for you while you mourn weak people. Like, and I love that. Like, so I dig that. I thought that was pretty fun and really random. Like,
yeah.
I really feel like they're like, Batman wouldn't be in the processional. Well, what's he doing? Well, he's probably protecting them. Well, what if there's no threats? Well, we got to come up with a threat. And they're like, guy with a bomb. That's pretty much it.
Right.
Very random. I love it.
We get the Star Labs people looking down on it from above. And then we also get, like, likewise the people in the underworld, like, looking up through the grates. And
so, as I said, I didn't remember the Morlocks existed quote. So as soon as that panel happened, I'm like, what is happening? I was not prepared for this. It was the weirdest way to remember these characters existed. I was like, what? Like, just because that one panel with
big
the slug
line in this arc that involves them,
right? Yeah, I was like, that's really interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, then we got the huckster like selling the Superman swag or merch, which I'm so curious about. Like, I wonder if it's like Wheezy being like mad at DC because when the Death of Superman issue came out, there was a bagged version that had the armband that you could buy. That was clearly like a cash grab kind of thing that they were putting out there. It was like a little more expensive. And I was like, this will be the collector's thing. Like, buy it and don't open it so you don't read it. So you have to buy a second copy so you can actually read the issue. I feel like this is just a commentary on that.
Yeah.
I know they did that.
Really? Yeah, I remember that. And then it ties into that Justice League issue I mentioned because they all put the armbands on. And it's like, you want to be a hero, you're going to wear one of these armbands, $30, please. Like, and so I do like this little dig. And part of me, again, the guy selling them, that design, that has to be based on a real person. I don't want to speculate on who, but like,
Right.
Like, yeah. But yeah, another shot with my boy Bebo.
Yeah. And Bibbo's like ready to pop him one for, trying to monetize Superman's death, but like he has a sob story too. Like his house was destroyed by Doomsday. And he's trying to make some money right now because they have to figure out like what they're going to do. And it's nice that like Bibbo's like, I should deck you, but Superman wouldn't do that. Superman wouldn't do that. So why don't you come work at my bar?
Yeah, I really like that.
We get the big statue, which I'm curious when the statue first shows up because it's shown up in a lot of like Superman material. Like it's in the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
I knew that looked familiar.
And like, I'm pretty sure it was in like the Death of Superman, like the imaginary story. So I'm not like sure when it first shows up, but it's like weirdly just like part of Superman lore that eventually there'll just be a statue of him downtown.
Well, see, here's the thing though, because at the beginning of this issue, they mentioned the memorial statue that he commissioned. And Supergirl said she would carry it to the park for him. So, like, I assume that's when that was, but did it appear before this? Because then that's weird.
Oh, no, sorry. I meant that, like, this version of this statue shows up here for the first time. Gotcha. Like, it didn't exist in Post-Crisis. But I'm curious when in, like, the larger Superman comics did it first show up.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Ever. Because, like, it's apparently just a tradition of whichever Superman lore you're paying attention to, eventually there will be a statue of Superman.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
Which is just like it's just weird. Like, I mean, it's nice that they're calling back to what was already a thing in pre-crisis continuity, but I just don't know when in pre-crisis continuity it first showed up.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah. Too many crises.
But you know what's a weird thing that does show up? Rex Leach, who anyone who's familiar with the '90s Superboy is his agent.
Oh
and
my
God! He's got armed goons.
I just remembered that.
Like he shows up trying to book Jimmy Olsen, or sign Jimmy Olsen. Pardon me. It's been a while since I've watched Entourage. He's trying to sign Jimmy Olsen. And then it's like, oh, you won't go with me? I've got armed goons. And I'm like, whoa.
Escalation.
Whoa. Like, I mostly know him from like hanging out and being like kind of a huckster, but in like a Hawaiian shirt living in Hawaii with like Superboy, the kid.
Imagine having the worst timing. Because you're like, I'm going to shake this guy down. You know what the best place to do it? In front of every superhero on the planet. the one place I know every superhero will be. That was so funny to me. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Have a little planning.
And then Robin saves him. And it's like kind of nice to have a Robin Jimmy Olsen moment. But this is the Tim Drake Robin. So it's like weird in that regard. Because like the history of them being friends was like Dick Grayson.
Yeah, right.
But then a fight breaks out. And we get some nice shots of Green Lantern rounding up everyone in some kind of saucer. And a very busty shot of Wonder Woman.
Yeah, it is. At least she's got muscles. I'll give her that.
Yes.
Like, because sometimes she's drawn without muscles, and that always bothers me. So yeah.
Right, a twig with 2 beach balls stapled to it.
I have to point out the next page again, Mom, Pa Kent. But that first shot of Lex on the TV, that is hilarious to me. That is one of the funniest things I've ever seen drawn. I don't know why. It reminds me of like, do you remember Tom Thumb from the Squadron Supreme?
Yes.
I immediately thought of Tom Thumb. I was like, what in the world? I was like, oh, it's Lex, and his hair is taking over. It's bigger than the TV. Like,
yeah, his face is so small, but his hair takes up the whole screen.
Yeah.
And it was great because it's a really emotional moment. But then I'm just staring at Lex on the screen. Like, it was really kind of a weird situation. But yeah, again, this through line of Mom, Pa Kent. Love it. It's just perfectly done.
And then the next page, the year that this came out is very obvious.
I completely forgot until you said the next page and I hit over and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, man.
like, ladies and gentlemen at home, it's a full page of just panels of the Clintons just talking about how important Superman was.
Oh, man.
And it is quite the snapshot of 1992.
Yeah, it definitely is. And in Hillary's hairstyle dates almost to the month, if you know.
Right.
Yeah. So that was pretty random. I was like, wait, what? Like, yeah, I completely forgot about that again. So
Yep. It's wild that.
I mean, Obama was in the Spider-Man issue. Like,
yeah. No, it's not the first time by far. Infamously, again, the month after John F. Kennedy died, there was an issue of Superman that came out where Superman revealed himself to John F. Kennedy. Yeah. So, because of the timeline of how comics happen, so it's not the first time, but it's like there's like it's Bill and Hillary Clinton. Like, I'm sorry, it's just like what. It's just such a moment, and there's so much baggage.
It's so funny to me because, like, traditionally, Marvel takes pains to be in the real world. You know, everything's set in New York City or San Francisco or something. And DC has these made-up cities. But when DC, it's time to have a president, they're like, the real president. And I'm like, what does Bill Clinton think of the crime in Gotham? That's what I want to know now. Like, so, yeah.
Well, he'd probably go from like a 3-strike to like a grand slam policy only or something.
Yeah.
God, if Gotham City was real, it like, oh man. Anyway, so not going too far down that rabbit hole. So Lois finally calls the Kents, or I guess she tried to call them before, but they were out. Or rather, there was a ring before. But here she's actually calling, and the Kents are now actually doing their own funeral ceremony. And this is a really touching scene of them standing over the crater where Clark's rocket came in, and then putting all of his like personal effects into that space, while then it's being cut back between that and the actual lowering of the coffin into the sarcophagus inside this like mausoleum that they have set up in the center of their park. Yeah.
I really liked that. That was probably the most touching scene. Like that funeral was really sad.
All the Ma and Pa Kent stuff in this book it's a gut punch.
It's a glaring example of how effective they can be when you use them correctly.
Yeah. And that's why I'm always like a little hesitant to just like flat out agree that the parents or Pa specifically should be dead, because I think that there is merit at a point, and like he should have to deal with it, but he could already be Superman and still then deal with the fact that he can't save his dad. See,
I like them alive personally. I'm a big fan of Son of Kal-El, the series going on with John, and him having the Kents to go to is really great. That's been really refreshing. And also you find out that the Kents had a weekly conversation with Alfred over the phone to talk about their superhero boys and the problems with them, which I was like, amazing. So yeah, I'm 100% pro both Kents being alive.
Yeah, so then we finally get Lois talking to the Kents, and it's super sweet. Like, the Kents they draw their strength by doing good to other people, which is good because that shows how they're so important to Superman, because like they are reinvigorated by being like, Lois needs us. We have to go to her. Yeah.
Right after they said there's, like Pa says, it's almost like there's no reason to go on living. And I'm like, what? Like, that was really, really a lot. But then they're like, oh, here's a reason. Good. Here's a temporary solution to this very alarming problem I brought up. Like, yeah.
So then we head over to Superman, no subtitle, 76. And this is mostly the Justice League and then intercut with some other stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So the Justice League gathers to be like, well, this sucks, right? Superman's dead. This is upsetting. And they all kind of like give their like thoughts on mortality, specifically Batman being like, death's a part of life. And some of us like draw justice from it. Justice.
He's so depressing. Like, why? I don't get it. It's not fun. See, again, and this is the issue where the other issue with my boy Guy Gardner, who's just like, this is bullshit, basically. Like, and he's like, fine, I'll do the right thing. Everything Guy Gardner does is begrudgingly, and he knows he's doing the right thing, and he wants to do it. He just wants to complain about it while he does it, and I love him for that. So.
But we also pick up with Mitch, the kid whose house got destroyed in the previous, well, not the previous issues, 2 issues back in Superman, when Superman was fighting alongside the Justice League, these characters. Right. Or fighting Doomsday. And it's nice to pick up with this character because he is now feeling grief because like him calling for Superman, as oddly positioned in the continuity as it was, because there was the transition between issues had like some weird positioning things where it's just like he's calling for Superman to help and Superman like is like, I have to ignore him. And then the next he's like, no, I'll stop Doomsday for a moment, then go back and help and yada, yada, yada. But either way, it's dealing with him and his version of grief, feeling that he is responsible for Superman's death and that he had taken Superman such for granted that he thought he was lame. And then like when all else, like when it was time to get saved by a superhero, Guy Gardner didn't do it. Like Guy Gardner was taken out of action by this point. It's like Superman's the only one who like came back for him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like him kind of like he like came to Metropolis and he's mourning and he's just walking through the rain and he doesn't know what he wants to do. Like he doesn't have a fucking clue because he's like 17. Like who the fuck knows? Like he's just upset and he just needs to be there. And he's like, oh, someone who might be connected to Superman's making an announcement. And it's this like sham woman pretending to be like Mrs. Superman.
Yeah. And that's weird. I mean, like I actually kind of enjoyed this, sham woman trying to be Mrs. Superman. Cause it's like it reminds me of the people that like that one woman who claimed to be a survivor of 9/11 but was not involved, but just found this community and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. That, just attaching yourself to a tragedy, not necessarily for fame, but just because you want to be a part of something. That's kind of how I interpreted that. But that I liked that a lot.
Yeah. I like Jimmy connecting to Mitch, though. Like, I thought that was a nice detail there. Like, Mitch kind of is playing the role of like a younger Jimmy in that regard. Like now we get to see Jimmy sort of like taking on the step of being the emotional support for the young kid, and takes him to a bar.
Way to go, Jimmy.
The Kents arrive, as does Lana, and Lana just is like suddenly in the apartment. like Lois gets home, the Kents are there, and then just like Lana's there, and it's like, didn't expect to see you here. But it's good to bring them all together because like we need the family part for Superman to gather. Meanwhile, the Justice Leaguers all go to read all the fan mail that's sent to Superman every year for Christmas and try to respond to all the things.
It's a filler episode within a filler episode. It's so funny to me.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, it's like, oh, we got to do a Christmas episode. All right, well, like, we got to answer Santa's letters, but it's Superman, basically.
I gotta say, I swear to God, I did not plan this, but this is going to be the episode that drops around Christmas time.
Amazing.
Which is just kind of great.
Let's talk about that Nightwing panel. That hair is amazing, The lips are luscious. Like it's such a great shot. Like I love the way people draw Nightwing. He's incredible.
Yeah. Like if you didn't know that was a letter, if that was like a photo, you'd be like, he's going like, ooh.
He's cooing. like I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that they talk about how there's a mix of letters that are like bullshit letters or like things that like Superman really just can't do anything about. And then other ones where it's like, oh no, they can. And then and they get to the one and like part of it is the right idea, which is they get to Mitch's mom sends the letter. And it's like, okay, well, that's nice that it's amazing that she wrote the letter that fast. The day that Superman died, like she sent it. And they're like, well, we have to help fix the house. We should go do that. That part's good. We'll get to why I have questions later. Cut to the bar. Bibbo is hanging out with Mitch and Jimmy, and they realize we're like, oh, this kid looks familiar. And they're like, oh, fuck, Superman saved you right before he died.
Right.
And they all just keep telling him that they know Superman, but it is interesting. There's never a point where they like share credentials on this one. It'd be like, no, I am Superman's pal. Like Signal Watch. See?
Well, he almost believed that fake ladies. So, I mean, he's obviously gullible for these things. So.
That's true. And then these two just like buy him a meal and then give him airfare to go back home.
Yeah.
So it's good though, because like, it's nice to see like these different perspectives of the three of them, even though they're all like, they're like different points in the same timeline of like, people who I don't want to say it's not exactly a parasocial relationship, but it's like this this friendly relationship with Superman, but it's from the distance by virtue of the fact that Superman himself is a secret identity. Like Jimmy is his pal, Bibbo, like they're friends, like they're like you can't say no that they're not friends. And Mitch would be almost like in that direction. If Superman had survived, you imagine that they could have actually had some kind of a relationship. Because again, Mitch is almost like like the next generation Jimmy, right. And Bibbo is like Jimmy if he had a drinking problem.
Mitch is very much a '90s Jimmy. Like
yes,
like he's just like, I got long hair, but I also wear a ball cap backwards. I'm like, you look like Axl Rose. I'm like, did they choose Axl Rose as the model because you look like Axl Rose? And he could have definitely been a '90s Jimmy. That's just Jimmy, but a little edgy, man. Like, yeah,
he skateboards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Poochie.
Exactly. It's the Poochie version of Jimmy.
Yeah, basically.
Then we cut back to Lana, who is depicted as blonde in my copy. I'm not sure if it was recolored for the digital. And then her talking to the Kents and Lois, and then trying to figure out like what they want to do with the secret identity. And they're like, no, he wanted his privacy. We'll respect that, which is good because he comes back to life. I don't know if that's the choice I would have made if I didn't know he was coming back to life, though.
Yeah. I do like that they address how complex of a situation this is. I like that. Yeah. Because there are situations where, like, characters with the secret identity die, and they never really address the fact that the secret identity or the real identity disappears as well. I know the one that's always really good about that is Daredevil. There's always something there to explain it. Mm-hmm. Like when he's in jail, it's like, oh, my twin brother's going to take my place or something. So I like that they addressed it.
How many versions of Mike Murdock have there been? Yeah, I like that they addressed it. I think that Lana raises good points. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm like, honestly, if Superman wasn't coming back, I don't know if I would side against her in this conversation, because there are good points made. Eventually they're going to figure it out. Like, is it better to control the narrative or to allow it to explode whenever it does?
Yeah, do you get out ahead of it? Like, yeah. So,
but then we skip to the spot that I'm like not as sold on. So they go to Mitch's dad and they're like, didn't you know that your wife and 2 children were almost killed by a monster? And he's like, no, I wasn't paying attention because, I'm a terrible dad who I do keep soda stocked in my fridge, but like I'm a terrible dad. Yeah. And then they like reunite the family. And it's like, look at how nice it is that we reunited this family. But I'm like, is it? Like, they got divorced or they were separated for a reason. Like, I realize it sounds like very nice to be like,
and that's bothersome.
Yeah, like we got them back together, but he walked out on his family. Like, is this like, I mean, we don't know the circumstances, but also like, don't take for granted that it's automatically a good thing.
Also, if they wanted us to paint that this relationship would get back together, Diana should not have been the one to go to him. because she's standing there in a bikini basically, and he goes, ay, 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 and then he's like, I want to get back with my wife. I'm like, I don't believe this at all. It should have been.
Yeah, he thinks she's a stripper at
first.
It
should have been Guy Gardner, because Guy Gardner would have smacked him around a little bit, which would have been great. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the rest of the Justice League rebuild their house. That's good. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, we also brought back your deadbeat husband.
It would be really great if it was like, we brought your deadbeat husband back, and it's like, honey, I want to come back. And she's like, after everything you've did, and the Justice League are, what? And then he's just like, listen, she meant nothing. She's like, she meant everything to you. And they had like a domestic in front of the Justice League. I would love that, actually.
That would be a very Venture Brothers type scene, but I would be so here for it. Where it's just like Flash, Hal Jordan, and Diana are just like, we should go, right? Yeah, we should go. Yeah.
Okay. Leave them here for this.
Yeah. And then Guy's like, told you. Like, that'd be great. I'd love it.
Yeah. And I get it. Like the amount of nuance and conversation about divorce has expanded exponentially since divorce has become more normalized over time. And this is still relatively fresh in that era, given that, this is 92-ish. So like we were talking about it only being like a little bit after it being legal, like a decade after it being legalized or like no fault divorce. I mean, and so like this is still at the time where they're like, everyone's getting divorced these days, which is like a pop culture statistic that only made sense because all those marriages were terrible.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And this is like, oh, well, now all of a sudden it I don't know. I feel like we're more aware that like, no, that might have been a really bad situation. And like dragging him back, it was not necessarily making it better without showing us why it's better now. Like, and they could have done that, but they didn't here. And thus I am like conflicted about this whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, I give it 6 months kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, Mitch is at the statue of Superman and feeling a little bit better. And Jimmy's like, come on, pal. And then they head out just in time for the Kents and Lois and Lana to show up. And they like, there's a spot where Jimmy's like, I swear I heard drilling, like while he's standing at the statue.
Do you guys hear that?
Yeah. Anybody, or is it just me? Okay.
It's a really awkward bit. But then we get the cliffhanger for this episode or issue is that that Paul Westfield has overseen Superman's body being taken out of the tomb by way of drilling a new tunnel into it. And, that's going to be a big plot for the remainder of this arc.
And this is the point in which I stopped caring. No, not so much stopped caring, but this is definitely the first 4 issues were the highlight of this run for me. After this, we mentioned it's kind of the filler. This is when we get the filler episode.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly an arc that just like everything gets reset to 0 at the end of it all. So like, only so much value, although there is some, because it does help explain, because they don't have a pre-existing reason why they're able to make Superboy.
Yeah.
So there is some of that there. But we pick up with the Adventures of Superman 499. Keith, just as a reminder, the reason why it's Adventures of Superman, but with a really high issue number, is that this is the original Superman book.
Run.
Yeah. And they just added that title for reasons that I don't get.
Those comics.
Yeah. But we open with Lex Luthor getting an alarm, and like they very clearly are like, he is banging Supergirl.
Is he though? Because like
he comes out naked in a robe, and she follows behind in a nightie.
I hate that, for the record. That's probably one of my least favorite things. Like, I was like, why did it have to be sexual? You know what I mean? Like, it made it so much weirder to me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Especially because like he's still supposed to be like an adult. Like I take him as like a 25-year-old body, like somewhere in that range ish. And Supergirl, she's always presented here as being a little bit more of an adult than she gets aged down slightly when she merges with Linda Danvers in her own book. And obviously she is a construct that has the memories of an adult Lana Lang. So I don't know where we're at in that whole thing. But she's usually presented as like the big sister to Superboy later. So like she's at least supposed to be like college age in terms of her character. And she's got this sexual relationship with Lex Luthor. I almost feel like it'd be better if he was also supposed to be like a 19-year-old inheritor of like the Luthor fortune or something. Could have made it at least like not, because it's still somehow predatory. Like like not just the fact that it's Lex Luthor Senior. It's like Lex Luthor Jr. still feels predatory here.
It's because he looks like a ginger version of the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. Like, that's why. Like, especially in this one. His hair is way toned down in this one. But yeah, he literally visually resembles a predator. Like, with the way the hair is and the eyebrows and stuff. This is a Wolverine / Sabretooth look. And and
with the Aussie accent.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then she's just like this bright young girl popping out of his bedroom. Didn't like that much.
Well, and then they're like, oh, go to the Superman place, but also use the secret tunnel that we installed, which makes me ask, like, why did anyone bother to drill the tunnel? Just like use the secret tunnel.
Right, exactly.
Do you think they got in there and they were like, oh, there was a door this whole time? Shit. And then I love this like little bit here where one of the plot points only happens because Supergirl explicitly like forgot to do it, which is that she approaches in her covert, sneaking into his tomb. She approaches without going invisible, and she thinks to herself, I guess I could have been invisible, but and she opens up the grate, goes inside, and someone sees just like this red cape go inside Superman's tomb, who at first I thought was Mitch, like, because he looks a lot like Mitch, but it is an undercover cop who is just supposed to be pretending to be a homeless person sitting, or an unhoused person sitting on the bench, but he's actually like I said, an undercover cop, like guarding the park. And he sees this whole thing and it's like, guys, we should get some people out here because something's weird happening here. At the very least, a giant crate just moved.
Yeah.
And she goes in this like very tech looking kind of tunnel and vault into Superman's tomb and finds him gone.
Yeah.
I thought that the slab was like the concrete thing they put him in. And I was like, oh, wait, no. Was there actually a coffin there?
Yeah. So that's like, we saw that there was like a slab that the coffin was put inside of before. So I also was confused. I think that this is the issue of different artists drawing the same thing without necessarily being able to see each other's work. Right. Like it should have been like the top slab is like pushed aside and there was a gap there where the coffin was inside of.
Yeah. Like,
but I think from this point on, every time we see it, it's just a coffin sitting on the slab instead of being entombed, as it were.
Yeah, I think obviously the funeral one, I bet they like submitted it in like bigger, more elaborate, and then obviously they wanted to contrast the Kent funeral as, being very small, but, intimate and something that matters to them. So yeah, he's in a coffin, but we'll put the coffin in a coffin, like I think that's kind of what it is. They just kind of push that issue to be as good as possible because the only issue comes close to the death of a character is the funeral of a character. So
yeah. Meanwhile, this is just the filler episode in between.
Yeah, exactly. No one
cares. So Smash Cut 2 gangbusters standing outside the statue. Everyone's coming to this fucking statue. Like, why didn't Supergirl think to go invisible? Because clearly people just keep fucking coming to it. Turns out Cat Grant has dumped him already, which we didn't get to see that breakup on screen.
Yeah.
And he's really pissed off about it. Anderson comes up behind him and he just decks him. And then the cops are like, hey, we should arrest you because you just decked a cop. We're like, no, it's okay. He's a vigilante. What?
Oh, I don't know. Comics are weird. But I had a question about Vigilante. I'm still trying to figure out where he came from. What is his whole deal?
Oh, about Gangbuster?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Gangbuster, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know when he first shows up in comics. The biggest arc that I know of connected to him, aside from him just being around in Metropolis for a lot of stuff, was one where after killing Zod, Superman feels this intense torment and is like psychologically upset and like goes through these episodes where he'll dress up as Gangbuster and go and be this like hyper violent vigilante at night. And there's like this whole issue of like the real Gangbuster being upset that like this other guy was like honing in on his turf and pretending to be him. But I don't really remember because he's like kind of just like, we need to have like a Batman type character, but we're not going to deal with Batman these days.
Yeah, I remember specifically because, like I said, I didn't remember him at first, but then I did remember him because of Gangbuster 2, which is actually his niece. She first appeared in DC Rebirth. So then I was like retroactively learning about him at that point because I did read that. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's supposed to be like a less well-funded, like street level vigilante, which is why he's wearing like stuff that looks more like stuff you could buy at like an Army Navy surplus that's been like all like recolored to have one kind of unified design. Like it's a little bit more like thrown together instead of like, here's my cool superhero outfit. So cut to the Kents having trouble sleeping, and like they're all like upset, and they're all staying at Clark's apartment. Yeah. And then as soon as Supergirl's gone, Lex Luthor has a whore come in. Right? Or at least a mistress. I'm not necessarily sure the relationship there, but he's like on the phone with her, and at the same time this girl's like pouring him glasses of wine.
Right. It was very strange.
Yeah. Like you'd figure he would be prepared for her to like suddenly come back. Like,
yeah,
it just seems like a weird plan.
I mean, they make the point, and it's a common thing, is the fact that he pretty much surrounds himself with women anyways. Now here's the thing, right? Her name is Lori, and immediately the only Lori I could think of was you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. Is his niece. But she doesn't look like that.
Oh, no, I was thinking Lori Limerus.
Oh, I was thinking Lori Luther. And I was like, that's not Lori Luther. So I was kind of like, it's got to be someone else. And I couldn't think
that's true. And it is a redhead. So
yeah, but I just thought that was funny. I was like, so.
Yeah, it's weird. I will say, for as weird as a relationship this all is, Tom Clement draws a beautiful Supergirl. Like when we cut to the next page, it's like, oh yeah. And there's like something interesting about like the full hair that she has there that is different than like what I think of as like a Kara haircut. Mm-hmm. Wow, the syllables just got like mixed up there. You know, like it's much longer and flowing, and like I don't know. It's interesting that like it. Like Matrix, despite the fact that objectively, like all the details are the same as Kara, like looks different to me.
I like the layers of the hair. If we're gonna get hairdresser about it, I do like how I like the bang, the big swoop of the bang, but then everything behind it's layered. I think that's really cool looking, actually.
So cops show up, and this actually is the thing I was alluding to before. Like Dan Turpin's going to go in there, and Dan Turpin teaming up with Supergirl is like kind of a fun team up. And like by the end of this book, he has like a patriarchal, but like a fatherly relationship to her. Like he's like really worried about like what that like Lex Luthor Jr. is doing with her. Like, and he's not concerned at the beginning. Like over the course of it, he like comes to really care for her.
Right.
Which I think is cool. And then Dan Turpin just goes in solo into the underworld.
I got it. Looking like Dum Dum Dugan and shit.
We get a team up of Bibbo and Gangbuster and dealing with some hoodlums.
Yeah. Once again, showing how like the every person is trying to step up and take the place of Superman, basically. So
we cut to these giant caverns that Supergirl discovers, and there's like, oh, there's a fork in the road. Let's go this way. And Dan Turpin follows because he hears violence going on. So it's very clear to everyone that it's like, nope, they have both gone the wrong way. That other way was the way they were supposed to go. God damn it.
That's one of my favorite parts about this as we get into this story, because they go down the wrong fork, obviously. We have this big confrontation. Later, everybody's gathering, and then they're just like, we don't know where they could have gone. And then it's just like, well, there was another fork. And I was like, it took way too long to bring this up. It was really weird to me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Then we get Supergirl confronted by Closter, the doomsday looking.
I was going to say, how dare they? Like he looks exactly like Doomsday, but a different color. Like, just wait a month. Like, it's ridiculous. So yeah.
And the crazy thing is that he was already established in the previous. Like he's the character that Doomsday's kind of ripping off.
Yeah, I was like, Closter. What a stupid name, too. Sounds like a Pokemon.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Turpin, when he gets into the fight with everyone, like his clothes get shredded and he's just like there. And he's fucking ripped despite being like a squat, like kind of heavy set dude.
Yeah, he's like bodybuilder ripped. It's great.
Yeah, like it's like the Kingpin, but like a little bit smaller.
Yes, exactly, actually.
And he's like fighting fucking aliens.
Yeah, I love it.
And mutants, and their grenades are being tossed around, and then he's like pulled out in just his boxers.
Yeah, that was a weird choice because in the end it didn't actually serve a purpose, him losing his pants, and I was like, why did they do that? I was kind of curious.
Yeah, and it's brought up again in the following issue.
They're like, yeah, I got pants. I'm like, cool. Why did we do this?
But we get confirmation that Cadmus has taken Superman's body. Also, we get one of many explosions in the underworld, so this is not the only one that will occur, and it's not the one that really matters. It's just one of them.
One of the many.
Picking up back over in Action Comics. What issue is this? This is,
Yep.
686, yeah. Where we're going to focus on the Guardian now.
Captain America. What?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so weird because the subtitle for this issue is "Who's Buried in Superman's Tomb," and it has nothing to do with the plot. Like, it's so weird. Like, yeah.
I mean, I will bet you all these titles were like figured out before they actually wrote the issues, because they were all like, we talked last time that, well, not last time we were talking about the anime, but the time when we were talking about the comics, like how they had like thumbnailed out like all the story beats and so forth. And I'm sure that there was more thought about like, oh, by this point, Superman's tomb stuff will still matter. And it doesn't by the time we get here. I like that one of the criminals is like, it can't be the Guardian. He like, my grandfather was like arrested by the Guardian one time. And it's like, dude, like superheroes change who's like the costumes pass on all the time. And like, yes, this one is a weird scenario where an old school superhero had his body cloned and his brain transferred into a younger body. But
it's not like you can check his ID and determine it's the same Guardian. It's really weird.
Right, exactly. Like it's not that complicated. It's just, and it's not even like a dude with like his face shown. Like he's wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
But the Guardian is distinctly Captain America-esque in this whole sequence.
There's a bit here where they're like the prisoners are accusing you of assaulting them basically, and he's just like, "Don't worry, my handy dandy bike has like a bunch of cameras that recorded the whole thing." And I was like, that cop is like, wonder if we could get something like that, like some sort of body cam. And I was kind of like, I was just staring at this page for a while. So yeah,
it prints it to a laser disc for him.
Laser disc.
Thank God we all have Laserdisc players, right? Wink at the camera.
Yeah, so then Guardian gets summoned by Double X, and we get an extended sequence of Lex kind of going over the whole, like, just in case you forgot, I'm a clone.
Lex is also recovering, his hair is recovering its volume. It's building back up for the next Simonson issue.
I do like the whole idea of like Suicide Slum being this old neighborhood that was like part of like the golden age tradition of characters. Like Guardian is like this Kirby era character who is like, I'm going to protect the Newsboy Legion. And it's, you know, just like, it feels very like Great Depression-y kind of style. And then it's like, okay, and nowadays we have like a secret base that goes underneath our like the garage that we used to work at when back in the day.
Yeah.
So Guardian returns. We get Turpin. By the way, like Turpin looks like such a nerd in this when they cut to him.
Yeah.
He's wearing a bow tie. He looks like just a totally different proportion. He looks like the energy vampire from What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
But with a red hat on.
Amazing.
But then we're going to kind of focus over at Cadmus, where like Guardian is pissed off to find out that Superman is here. And, you know, Supergirl's investigating the tunnel, and then there's an explosion that had a fucking Cadmus logo on it.
Branding, man. gotta get your name out there, I guess.
And this is where it gets interesting, because this explosion happens right after the previous set of explosions, and now all of a sudden there's flooding going on. And so this is the explosion that actually matters for the success of events, because like now there's flooding going on in the city, and the city was already fucked up and everything. And I'm like, did they just write the same scene twice, or like not decide who was going to do the same scene? Like, but then they've got the pants part down. Like they're like, oh no, you don't need to get me new clothes. I've got new clothes.
It's amazing. That's the one bit of continuity that was perfect in the series is the pants.
Right.
The
That could have just been like a line of dialogue that was added later. So like maybe it was like, oh no, we covered the explosion, but there's a second explosion, this time a Cadmus themed explosion.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think this one, I don't know why they did the first one is what I'll say. Obviously, this one matters. This one points to Cadmus. It's the one, I don't know why they did a first one. Like, it didn't need to be explosion. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they were going to do something where Supergirl and them thought that they caused the flood, but that isn't really addressed, if I remember correctly. Like, I don't know.
There is a moment where Lois asks one of the guys from the underworld, like, did you guys cause the flooding? And they're like, you overworlders flood our tunnels, and then you blame us for flooding them?
Yeah.
Which, sure, I guess that is like a legit issue, but...
But they hand her the bomb after that, though. Or hand her one of the bombs.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
We do set up the super cult, which I think is good, and is going to be very important when we get to the reign of the Supermen part.
Yeah.
This is an era in comics where a lot of the ideas of like worshiping the superheroes is starting to come around. Like it's around here where we're getting like the 2099 stuff from Marvel. And so, you know, we'll be dealing with like the Spider-Rights and the Thor-Rights at that point over on the Marvel side. Now, admittedly, it's the future, but it's interesting that in the early 90s in the zeitgeist was a conversation about like, well, wouldn't we start worshiping the superheroes? Like, and, you know, you can like draw a line back to like, all the stuff with like Miracle Man, for example, with Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, like doing the same thing at the end of the 80s. This is all part of this like filler arc of like, all right, well, what happened to Superman's tomb? Like, and they're like, all the cops are being like, I don't know. Like, it's probably Cadmus, but like, is it Cadmus? And like, they all know it's Cadmus.
Right. Like everyone and their mother knows it's Cadmus at this point.
They all know. Ma Kent knows it's Cadmus.
They literally tried to take the body from the scene of the crime. And we're told no. And he literally was like, I'll get it one way or the other. And then the body goes missing. And they're like, who could have taken the body? Like, it's like, yeah, it's very funny to me.
Yeah, it's because they couldn't advance it too quickly. And so they all have to just be like, could it be Cadmus? We need more evidence. Who could it be? Maybe, possibly Cadmus? No. Well, maybe. Well, hey, hold on. But let's investigate further. Could it be Cadmus? It might be Cadmus.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we get the Kins leaving town, which I think is good. I like they for one thing, like it makes sense that they would go home. For another, it's like nice to be like, yep, no, they've had their time with Lois, and Lana's also going to go. We get a good moment of Lana turning back to like go talk to Lois before she gets on her plane, and this is all pre 9/11, so Lois is allowed to be in the terminal because you know the world used to be a different place.
That bottom row of panels is incredibly intimate.
Yeah,
the way it was drawn was very romance comics to me, and I was kind of like, the first shot I thought, are they kissing? For like a split second, I'm like, did they kiss? And I'm like, no, they're not. And then they're both crying, and then the really close up of wiping her tear away, and I was kind of like, wow, this feels like a romance comic. It's very strange, especially the hard eye contact Lana's trying to make in that second panel.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I thought that was
engaged to who at this point?
Lana was with Pete Ross at this point.
Yeah, I was like, wait. I didn't remember.
Yeah. But next up, we get the other short story that's included in this collection, which is, again, so this one is written by Carl Kiesel with art by Walt Simonson. And it's entirely a side story.
Yeah.
But I like it. And I think it's important to talk about just for the larger continuity that they're kind of building, where they crack the code on Superman's DNA. And then the Newsboy Legion and their younger clone versions of themselves, the Kid Newsboy Legion, because I fucking love this part about it.
So
about this era of
ridiculous.
comics. The other directors of Cadmus used to be the kids in the 40s comic with the Guardian, and now they're adults who are super scientists and run a cloning facility. It's fucking great, but they have young clones also. And none of them are like really that cool with like what they're doing to Superman. And Paul Westfield's like, no, but we could do some cool stuff with it. Let me show you what we can do in terms of like cool stuff. And they bring them upstairs or bring them to this other section of Cadmus where there's a dude just flying around named Aron, who is revealed to be a super advanced clone of Guardian. And I think that's really cool. I really like his design overall. I love the fact that his jetpack is the Guardian shield.
Yes.
And he's like really like cybernetically linked to his computer. So he's like a bit more under control. But we get this whole thing about him as like this programmed clone. And I think that it is useful in terms of our conversation that will ultimately happen about Superboy being like a programmed entity that is like functioning. However, it establishes what Cadmus can kind of do if they're just taking a person and doing weird stuff with it, which I think is good. And also, Aron shows up later. I don't know if we'll ever actually talk about like when he reappears. As far as I know, he just shows up to die by the hands of Massacre, who is like a space version of Doomsday.
Less than 2 years later. Like, he literally has no duration. It's crazy. Like, it feels like they made a character and they're like, cool, we made this character. And then they realize, oh, we have to keep doing things with this character. And they're like, well, better kill him. So, like, that's really felt like his entire arc, basically.
I mean, he kind of felt... It is in part because his face is covered with like a golden sheath. He always gave me like a Silver Surfer vibe. And I realized that doesn't match up to any of the Silver Surfer backstory. He just like goes off and wanders around space and like in a less robust DC universe, that would probably be a really interesting, unique character type. But in a world that has had Adam Strange and like the Green Lantern Corps and the Dark Stars and Legion exactly, like he's not really like carving out a unique territory for himself here. And so they probably were like, well, does anyone want to explain who Aron is in the next issue? No? Is that text blurb going to be too big? All right, let's just kill him.
I also thought maybe early on he might have been one of the people they had in mind to be one of the Supermen, and maybe it got changed. That was my thought, because it felt like it's kind of setting that up. Like, he's like Guardian, but better. And I was like, okay, maybe he'll, and then suddenly we have these 4 new Supermen. I'm like, maybe he was planned to be one of those, maybe like instead of Eradicator, maybe.
Yeah, or Steel.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought.
I mean, they're all set up already at this point. But yes.
Yeah. Also, if you told me, or if you did not tell me this is Walt Simonson, I would have told you this is Walt Simonson. He has such distinctive art. Like, yeah,
it stood out to me immediately when I turned the page, and I was like, "Oh, that's Walt Simonson." Wait, I don't think he was writing any of these or like working on any of these books at the time, huh? And that's when I realized that there were stories that were included in the trade that were not part of like the issues we had said were on the list.
Exactly, yeah.
But all he does is he like chases them down and takes the disc that has like Superman's DNA like encoding on it, and then they're like, "Remember who you are? You're Jim Harper. You're Guardian." And he's like, "Oh, right." And he like crushes the disc after scanning it into his computer. And then later there's a point where someone just like, when he shows up for his death, it's like he's got the code of Superman in his rocket pack. And then they just like rip out the computer and destroy it because they're like, it's an old computer.
It's fine. No one cares.
They're like, it's pretty sophisticated binary code. Like, what is that? A piece of junk? All right, here, we'll replace the computer. And they like rip it off and like. Which I thought it was worth bringing up just because, like, okay, it's cool to see, like, all right, what is Cadmus doing? Westfield is a shitbag. Let's remind us of that. And also, Cadmus can do some interesting stuff. It's not just a cloning place. Like, they, like, their whole thing is they've created, like, DNA aliens, like, creating, like, all these, like, super powered things from human stock. And it's kind of cool in that regard. Cutting back over to Man of Steel, or Superman the Man of Steel, which makes sense because all of a sudden we're dealing with the sympathetic characters that are in the underworld, not just the monsters.
Louise Simonson comes back.
Flooding. Right, exactly. Louise Simonson comes back. She actually cares about these people.
Yeah.
And Metropolis is flooding.
I wanted to just quickly, before we jump into it, the cover.
Yeah.
I both love the cover and also think it's kind of hilarious. Like, I don't know, the proportion of Ma Kent is too small, and that's really funny to me. I don't know. There's something weird about it, but it's also really emotional and like a really cool idea, and it really sets you up for what we're going to be talking about. But I don't know. There's something about the cover that bothered me, and I was just kind of like wanted to drop that in there to see if you guys agreed.
Yeah, no, looking at it, it's so wild that the last 3 issues are all dealing with like a Jonathan Kent who is out of commission and really focusing on that. This issue, however, like that's the end of this, or further into this issue. Like at this point, we're just being reminded of all the sadness that Jonathan Kent is going through. Like the whole thing with like old Bessie, their old cow, and remembers her being a calf with, and with like a young Clark. And that's all super sweet. Like there's all these like great moments there.
Yeah. The way he feels about Clark and how he feels responsible for the life he led.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really well done. That's a great emotional hook.
Yeah, and it's intercut with like all the underworlders being like, why is everything flooded? And we're reminded just how many weird fucking things are there. There's like a telepathic seal, and there's a frog that acts as a submarine for them.
I loved that. Again,
it's great
because in the previous one it was like there's a bunch of ugly things. Also, there's the claw dude, and then they're really generic in the other one. But in this one, we're starting to see these insane designs that I absolutely love. I love the frog dude. I love the telepathic seal. I love the stretchy one hanging from the bar there. He looks great. I love it.
I love that the telepathic seal is named Teletype because he projects his thoughts to everyone.
Amazing. Also, I have to point this out. I don't know if it's this way because I'm reading digital. You'll have to tell me. But in that first 2-page spread with the stretchy one, the title is Ghosts. There's a gigantic gap between the H and the O on mine. Okay, that was really bothering me. I was trying to figure out if there was a purpose for that or not. It was a weird lettering choice is what I'll say. So
Yeah, that is where the binding is.
Okay, I was
so
going to say, I bet
it-
it's the binding because I read it digitally, and that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking. So.
I'll show it to you guys on here.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
yeah. That makes sense. Okay. It was just so weird. I was like, oh, I was like, what?
Yeah, I think they had to do that to make it so it would not get eaten by the.
Makes sense. It's just because we get the full picture, and just there's a gap there, and I thought that was strange. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So Lois is continuing to investigate this whole like everything's flooded, this is weird thing. We get a flashback of Batman being given the kryptonite ring by Superman, which is nice just to kind of, their relationship is not as good post-crisis as it was pre-crisis, but it's still nice to get reminders that there are those like intense moments between them, or intimate moments, I should say. We get Lois just like hanging out next to like the river, and like the Underworlders pop up and be like, "Hey, it's Miss Lane. Hey, what's going on?
I haven't seen you in a while."
We're like, here's the proof that it was Cadmus. It was the Cadmus themed bomb.
There's the shot where she runs into Maggie. When she finds the empty tomb, there's a shot of Maggie standing kind of in the background, and I swear to God, I thought that was Guy Gardner. I was like, why is Guy there? And I was like, oh, that's Maggie. Wow. Okay.
Maggie's hair has also changed depending on the artist.
Yeah.
So in this, she's got the same bowl cut as Guy Gardner, but in other shots, she has like more long flowing hair, and like it's just all over the place in terms of like what she's supposed to look like. Yeah. Like, I hate to say the following phrase, but it feels like they were like, she's a lesbian, draw the hair that you imagine the lesbian would have. And then they kind of went with that. Like,
it's like her character description is female redhead lesbian. Like, yeah, exactly.
I really like the memories then when we get moving on, though, with like Pa Kent recalling Clark coming home after his like introduction as Superman.
Yes.
And like being so broken. Like I really love that, because these are so close to the panels that we got in the Man of Steel comic, and they're being interjected with like this like memory kind of component to it. Like they're doing a really good job tying in like a book that probably Superman fans read, and like you like calling back to that so that we can feel like the sadness of this Superman, not just like Superman as a general concept, but like the post-crisis Superman.
I like how hulking he is in that scene.
I didn't like that.
I was gonna say, because I know, like earlier in the issue, when it's with him and Batman, he's in the full suit and he's gigantic, and I'm not a big fan of that look. But with him being sad, I thought it was really cool to emphasize that he's a big, strong, very powerful person that is kind of just a little boy when his dad's there. You know what I mean? I kind of liked that shot specifically, but not the general idea of Superman being gigantic. I'm not a fan of that usually. So
Yeah.
I have to talk about the previous issue though, where the frog dude drops them off. That lower panel of the frog dude looking as done with the situation as I've ever seen anybody is honorable mention for my favorite panel in this entire series. Like, he's just like, this is gonna wait for you guys, I guess. Like, I love that.
Then you got to go back in my throat, and I have to like be awkward with that.
Like, it's so weird.
Yeah. Then we get Lois in a wetsuit, going on a stealth mission.
Gotta say, this is my favorite version of Lois.
What stage of grief is this?
This is the kick-ass Lois that we're all
This
used
is
to
the
seeing.
anger stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kick-ass Lois that we're all used to seeing like earlier on.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it's so good. It's so refreshing to see her do this stuff again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Packhorse like phases them through, because again, this is the fucking Morlocks. They all have mutant powers.
So great.
So they sneak in, they team up with the Newsboy Legion, or the young Newsboy Legion, the clones of the Newsboy Legion. They go and they find Superman's body. One of the scientists there, though, looks just like the Asgardian executioner, including his haircut. And it throws me so off because I'm like, did people have that haircut in the 90s? And I'm scared to find out what the answer is.
I don't think so.
Don't remember?
I honestly do not think so.
But like, he's a scientist working on Superman's body, and they're like, let's give him these like two terrifying stripes on the side of his head.
In the picture where he gets elbowed by Lois, it looks like the stripes in his head attached to his eyebrows because of the way they like wrinkle it. It looks like it's like a crooked line that goes straight to his eyebrows, and that's insane. I think about what that would actually look like, and it's hilarious.
But then they realize Double X is coming, and they're like, well, I guess we should just leave Superman's body. And so they flee. And thus this arc has done nothing so far. Like, it's just they've confirmed that Cadmus has him, and then they sneak away. And Lois writes a story about it because it's upsetting. And Jonathan sees the story, and that's the thing that pushes him over the edge, and he has a heart attack.
Way to go, Lois. Jesus. No, yeah. Curiously enough, no Lex Luthor in this issue, and I was really anticipating his big body hair, and nothing.
Well, good news for you, because the next issue is a shirtless Lex first page.
Yes.
The Dan Jurgens appears to be sort of the medium length hair between everyone. It's not quite as long as like the John Bogdanov hair, and it's not quite as short as the Tom Grummett hair. But so he's working out with his female trainers, and while thinking about how like, oh, wasn't it great when I used to be, a big fat older rich man, and then I moved my brain into my clone body after I got cancer because of this game I was playing with Superman. Like, pretty great, huh? And he's like distracted, so he gets kicked by one of his instructors, and he's like really pissed off. And Lois is like, well, it's a good thing you're not like your dad, because your dad wouldn't have tolerated that shit, right, Lex?
I love it, just calling him out. Like, right? Am I right? Ha! Your dad wouldn't have put up with that. Like, it's so great.
And Lois shows up at like big suit, and like I in my headcanon is that one of Clark's blazers.
The shoulders,
yeah.
Like, it's
and a tie. And
it's amazing to see the two of them next to each other. Supergirl with the big hair and the weird skirt that looks like it's a leotard, but it's actually a skirt, and then her in the power suit with that tie. Like, it's just a great like contrast. I love it.
Yep. And so they all tease Lex about getting beaten by a girl, and then they go off, and Lois like shares like, here's the actual story, not the one that's going to see print. Like, here, like, because they're not going to let me like bash the U.S. government all this much. So here's the actual story, and he's like, I'll take care of this, darling.
Yes.
Crikey. Meanwhile, we got Jonathan being rushed to the hospital, and they're trying to deal with it. We get some more flashbacks, but these flashbacks aren't like, they're nice, but they're not they're not as well done as the previous issues, where it's like, okay, we're switching out the spark plugs. Those are all good, like good scenes, but it just doesn't like hit you the way like Wheezy and John did in the previous one.
It is kind of baby's first dad memory. You know what I mean? Like, if you're like, well, let's write a memory about a son and a dad working on the car. Like it doesn't feel as unique to their relationship, I guess.
Yeah, then we get Jimmy selling all of his photos of Superman to News Time, being like doing a magazine shoot on like the legacy of Superman kind of thing.
It's so weird that like Jimmy having that picture of Superman dead is very strange. I know it's his job and he wants to make sure he's honored and stuff, but he definitely could have done it in a less really depressing and gruesome way. Like, I don't know. It feels very strange to me.
I don't know how he gets the one of Superman, like the drone shot of Superman. Like he was on the ground. He wasn't on the helicopter at that point in the fight. He was on the ground. We know that he got a good shot of Superman and Doomsday like punching each other. And so like, did he get like a ladder? Like, how did he get that picture?
He got someone to carry him, like to pick him up.
Bloodwind, before you rush Ice off to the hospital, can you help me with this photo?
Yeah, right.
And then we have that, like, there's one shot, and I'm sure there's like a specific thing that it's alluding to, where that we've got Clark and Superman right there, but Clark's in a robe, and I'm like, that's a weird photo just to like randomly have like your buddy who's like just getting out of the shower, and also Superman's here.
Was that? I want to say, was it Supergirl transformed? Maybe. There's something in the back of my head ringing with that idea, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, that might be when he came back from space. They like when they were like trying to explain everything. Supergirl had been imitating Clark at that point, and that might be something to sort of like set up that he was back. But it is just a weird shot, though, like of him in just a robe right there.
Right. Yeah.
And they decide they want to use the photo of the flag, or not the flag, the cape, like flying on the random branch or pole or whatever.
I mean, it's more tasteful than the corpse from above shot, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely for the cover. Like that, I agree. It's a good shot to use.
Yeah.
Like I used it on the episode art for the first for the death of Superman already. Then we cut to Sasha, the karate instructor who decked Lex Luthor, And aside from like the like gratuitous changing shot that they have on there, she like everyone leaves and she like very clearly gets murdered by Lex Luthor. Like,
Yeah, right.
I don't think anyone was asking that question at this page. Like, it gets confirmed at the end of the issue, but like we all know, right?
She literally says there are no men in this building. Literally, she's like, except for Lex Luthor, and then says, "Hey, what are you doing in here? Can't you read that this is the women's locker room? Like, so it's a man, so it's the only man in the building." Like, I'm like, yeah, it was. I was like, that's painfully obvious, but yeah.
Then we get Lois like daydreaming about Superman while Supergirl is flying, and this is the point where I'm reminded, oh yeah, Supergirl doesn't know anything. Well, but she did. She knows she's May Kent. So wait, she has to know this situation,
Right.
Why is she confused here? Wait, no, she does know. Like, I was thinking, like, oh, I guess she doesn't know Superman's secret identity, but like, no, wait, she has to because she was raised by the Kents for a couple of
But
years.
does Lois know that she knows?
Well,
Regardless
of Lois knowing,
and does Supergirl know that Lois knows?
well, I can't imagine that this is where it gets really weird because they're like, wait, now I'm like, wait, hold on, I just pulled on the wrong thread and now my brain's breaking because. Since it's tough for you since your fiance passed away, but you better stop daydreaming. Her fiance's Superman. They're going on a Superman safety mission. It's not like she's like thinking about something else going on. They're going to go rescue his body. Like,
Yeah.
and I guess it makes sense kind of in the language is technically fine. Because the way I read that when I was like rereading this yesterday was like, oh, she's talking about Clark and he like is forgetting that Clark is Superman. But like that doesn't make sense because she has to know that Clark is Superman because she was raised by the Kents too. So what the fuck?
Also, random motorcycle gang to the rescue was amazing.
Yep.
Like, okay.
Well, again, like they just love the Kirby stuff, so like it's all part of like the Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen run.
It's just like, okay, cool, let's go. I guess. Like,
Yep, let's go break into Cadmus.
Yeah.
It's like we're on a rescue mission for Superman. Oh, you ride with us now.
Yeah, right. It's like I don't know why, but that kind of reminds me of like Spider-Man. Like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. I was kind of like, okay, like, yeah. Give me a Superman book where he joins a biker gang. I'll read the crap out of that.
Actually, so it did make me think. I think it was Amazing Fantasy 1000 that just came out. The one where it's like all the different writers doing stories of. There's like one where it's like the Sinister 60, I think, where it's like Spider-Man as like a 60-year-old man, like, and like all of New York has just come to agree that like, no, we don't pull up his mask. Like, no, we don't charge Spider-Man at the hospital for any recovery bills. Like, he's Spidey. Like, no, we care about him. He's a fixture of New York. And it felt like this.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
And by this, I mean like this whole book in general, not like specifically this moment, although this moment is part of that. Supergirl recovers the body of Superman and they bring him back to what is a new coffin that they have ordered for him, intercut with like them trying to resuscitate Jonathan.
I have to talk about one thing from the Jonathan page, though. The doctor saying, "I don't believe this. He's not fighting at all," is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a scene like this. Like, what kind of doctor's like, he's just not fighting? Like, that's, I don't know why that was like, maybe it's like the Norm Macdonald joke stuck in my head, you know, like he lost his battle with cancer. He's like, oh, the last thing you ever do is lose. I don't know, that maybe that's just sticking up. And it's just like, I don't believe it. He's not fighting at all. How do you know he's not conscious? Like, I don't know. That line really bothered me. I had to talk about it. So yeah,
it's like a Revenge of the Sith. Like, in her sorrow, she died.
Yes, exactly. She died of sad.
Lost the will to live.
Like, yeah.
Lois leaves the engagement ring inside the casket, which in a scenario where like this just adds to the weirdness of like Linda Matrix, pardon me, definitely knowing that Lois's fiance or was engaged to Superman, like, and they're like, oh, let's leave Lex Luthor to have his like final moments instead, while she secretly puts the ring in. Then we get Lex Luthor kind of like being like, ha, I got you, I win, bitch.
That face, that gotcha face is great.
Yeah. This is a good moment for Lex Luthor Jr. Like it's bonkers as far as plots go, but I do like it as an idea of like, yep, no, it is a villain that everyone thinks is a good guy and thinks is a different good guy, just like secretly there. And like, it's not that it hasn't been done before, and it's not that it hasn't been done since, you know, it's like in the same vein of like a superior Spider-Man kind of thing. But like, I like it here. I think it's good. Lex Luthor is like the businessman Lex, like had started to become too well known as a bad guy, and it's like nice to like really force people to be like, no, this one's a good guy.
It was good to kind of like set up the future, because we know what happens, so I think it was really good to set that up. It was a really good choice.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And like I really like the composition of the last page of like Jonathan flatlining and Martha saying, please don't leave me alone. Like I think that's great.
Yeah, because especially with the weird, like almost like we might as well die thing, and then it's like like it's very strange. So
yeah. And then we get The Adventures of Superman 500, which is a journey through, I mean, it's a divine comedy story, basically. Like it's Jonathan doing what dreams may come, trying to find his boy.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, because I'm reading digitally, was this a big holographic panel on this cover?
Yeah, for the cover, yeah.
I was going to say, I remember this cover. I remember being really turned off by it because it was like a really big holographic thing, and it was very strange to me. So
yeah, looking at the back of the trade, because I have this. This is an issue I actually have. If I remember correctly, the cover that came out, it's like a black border around it, and then this image is like a smaller hologram than like the way it's represented on the trade. But I can't remember the specific proportions of it. But yeah, it was like it wasn't like foil. It was like an actual hologram one, like that's like thicker, kind of like plasticky one.
I was thinking like when the X-Men did the like trading card foil ones, basically glued onto the covers, like for X-Force and stuff. That's kind of what I remembered it being like, but really big. So yeah.
Yeah, so Jonathan Kent is dying, and he appears to be in some sort of heaven, and I like the way they color it all. Like, it's got this like soft yellow kind of color scheme to it, which I think is really cool, with like lots of whites. Like they, like Superman is mostly white, but with like blue accents as opposed to like a blue costume, for example, to sort of make it feel very like ethereal.
Yeah, definitely. It is colored very well. It's drawn very well. It's very much a completely different style than everything else we've seen so far in this entire arc. So
yeah. So Lois is flown out because very quickly, I should note, to Jonathan Kent. And I guess that makes sense because Jonathan's been dying for 3 issues at this point. But like, it does feel like very fast.
Sometimes
for her to be out there.
Sometimes Smallville's across the country. Sometimes it's right down the road. That's one thing that's always really weird with Superman to me. Sometimes obviously Superman can fly, stupid fast, but like normal people get back and forth. It was more of a problem in the show Smallville. I remember that was one of my big pet peeves. But yeah, sometimes it's like right there, and sometimes it's across the place. It's really weird. So
yeah, I mean, some of it comes down to the fact that like originally Smallville was Cleveland, right? Like it was where the Siegel and Schuster were living, and so or not Smallville, pardon me, Metropolis was supposed to be, and so like the Middle America farmland is like right there. It's actually why like weirdly like when they've tried to like position Metropolis on like the DC map and they put it in Delaware, it actually works okay because Delaware is actually like a fairly big farming state, like even though it's a tiny state. Fun fact, one of the major centers of our chicken industry is there. Like Purdue Chicken is based out of Delaware because, just fucking crazy. And Smallville wasn't always explicitly Kansas. Smallville was actually like the farm country close to the big city. So it could be wherever because New York has farm country. Obviously, Ohio has farm country. Delaware has farm country. And it was really like the movie and then followed by the Man of Steel mini that locked it down as being like, oh, no, it's Smallville, Kansas, and not just like, oh, the town of Smallville. Like, because it's supposed to be in every town, it's supposed to be like, oh, it's just like little town America, like, Main Street instead of Wall Street kind of thing. I'm so mad that I just like my mind just flashed to Sarah Palin just there when I said that. Like, fucking this world. Yeah. Anyway, so it looks like Kryptonians are luring away Kal-El, and they're like, no, he's his human identity is no more. It is more important for him to go and die as the last son of Krypton than as anything else. Lois, meanwhile, shows up. We get a cut to a gangbuster thing where he is breaking up some kind of drug deal, and then it turns out that it was an undercover cop sting and he's like, I didn't know. And they're like, there's a warrant out for your arrest. Probably from decking Inspector Henderson.
Yeah.
That's funny. Like the cops are like, look, pal, those pushers you beat up deserved what you gave them, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, starts running. And then they're like, well, we better shoot the bastard.
It's definitely. I mean, it's an oversized issue. Obviously, it's 50-something pages, and it does kind of wrap up a lot of what we've set up, but not everything, which I thought was interesting. There's some characters we didn't quite check in with.
Yeah, we did check in with one character who we have not seen so far at this point in the story a little bit later on.
But I do love the, as you put it, the What Dreams May Come segment. I think that really stands out as really cool and interesting and very creative.
Yeah, I love them. Like, here's Jonathan's life and all the different tragedies he's faced in his life, like being a war veteran, seeing his brother die on the farm, like all, and like the brother dying on the farm was referenced way back in again, going back to the Man of Steel mini, where they talk about like when Clark is almost like run over by the bull. And it's just like, he says it flashed back to his brother dying, and like, oh, it's nice to have like characters who have like this history, and Jonathan being like a person who is adamant about like standing up for all these like little guys and like stopping all the hurt around him, I think is nice as he travels. And then we get into the sexual harassment scene with Vincent Edge, who is Morgan Edge's dad, who at this point has taken over GBS and ousted his son. Yeah, we just like cut to him having just like, I guess, pinched Cat Grant's ass.
Yeah. That happened.
Which that's so shitty. And then he like seems to like try to like convince her to go on a date with him. I mean, he's like, no, bring that boyfriend of yours, and no, bring your son. Like, but he's like very clearly like, he's such a Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah,
like it's so fucking there on the page. It's not even like read between the lines. It's just there.
There's no subtext whatsoever.
It's like, just text.
Yeah,
it's just text. But it is nice to check back in with Cat Grant, because she was created for the modern era of Superman books. Like, she's a Jerry Ordway creation to be like, no, like people would be into Clark because he's a nice guy who's really handsome and like good at his job. And like, it makes sense that like he would have romantic interests that aren't just Superman related ones. Like, so it's nice to have this character continue to sort of evolve and be a part of the world, even though he's now like engaged to Lois and dead. Mm-hmm. But like, it was good to have her as an entity in that universe. Like, that robust, rich like cast is really important to Superman.
Right. Exactly.
Then we get a little bit with the prankster, who like, if this was the only use of the prankster in all of like post-crisis DC, I'd be like fine with it. I was like, yeah, no, it's just like he does a little prank on his jail cellmate and that's it. Like, yeah. Like, and I know it's not. I know he's around, but like, this was kind of the perfect use for like one of these like goofier villains that like have a hard time being updated for a modern era.
Right.
Which was just kind of fun. Then we got Jimmy being sad. Of course. And we got them thinking about Jonathan as he's like fighting for his life. And then we cut to Jonathan like falling through a hole and like looking out for his dad. And then we get Satanus. No, pardon me. Blaze. Sorry. Satanus' sister. Which actually, so wait, this was Jerry Ordway, right? Writing this issue? I
think so. It was. I think there's multiple. Oh, they all contributed.
Well, no, it's this is true. There's a bunch of, well, no. It's Jerry Ordway on story.
Oh, I got on the online credits. They got Carl Kessel, Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Roger Stern, and Louise Simonson all listed. So,
on this one,
yeah,
but either way, and Carl Kiesel takes over after this point and work like on the Adventures of Superman book, because he's the one who, along with Grummett, like take on the Superboy stuff. So in a sense, that like this is also kind of saying goodbye to Ordway's like tenure on the book, because he's been on the book since the Crisis on Infinite Earths at this point. So Cat Grant being a part of the story makes sense. That was one of his. And also when he like going off of this, he goes off and does The Power of Shazam, where Blaze and Satanus are then big parts of that story. So like characters that he likes to play around with are showing up here. And it's fun that Blaze tries to tempt Jonathan Kent the same way she tempts Teth Adam. And Shazam, the wizard. And then we get Kismet, like eternity equivalent for like DC Comics.
Yeah.
This took a turn.
Yeah, it gets real cosmic.
I was gonna say like that's a very familiar form. Like that looks very, very similar to something else I've seen. So yeah.
I mean, like beautiful art, and then it like as Jonathan travels, he ends up on like what looks like Krypton, but it's like a weirdly religious Krypton. And that's a nice detail there. You know, we get a reference to the cleric, who is the one who was the guardian of the Eradicator. So it helps us sort of like primes us for all the weird little like lore things that we're going to be dealing with when we get to the reign of Superman.
Right.
Only for it to all be revealed to be demons trying to steal his soul. Jonathan's got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then cut to a dude just walking on the dock. And I swear to God, I thought this was Bibbo. And then I was like, oh no, we should go to Bibbo's place. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Again, talking about the John Kent stuff, like it's just like I like the design of the demons. Again, this whole portion of it I just really thoroughly enjoyed. I like the way it looks and everything like that. I like the Superman on the litter shot was really great. Like, yeah, so.
Yeah, and then him like pleading to his son, and his son like, you know, like Superman's like, no, all right, I'll save you, Dad, but I'm dead. I can't stay. And like, you know, and he keeps getting pulled back and pulled back and pulled back. Including what a fucking line of Jor-El, my true father, at one point.
Yeah, it's like, oof. Like,
it's kind of harsh. But then you're what, like, does Jonathan Kent think that way? Like is this all his fantasy?
Yeah, is this real? This is definitely one of those is this real moments. Like, yeah.
But then together they go into the abyss. And Jonathan Kent. Yes. Yeah, to protect his son, he summons the shovel by which to hit Jor-El with, and that works. It's super effective.
Yeah. It's pretty Green Lantern, actually. Pure willpower.
I mean, really, that is what it is at this point. But they go together into this like black void, and Jonathan wakes up, and it then cuts to a shot of the statue of Superman, and then cuts back to Jonathan, and he's like, "I did it! I brought Clark back." They're like, "You're crazy, Jonathan," and Lois flies home because you know she's got to get back to work.
That was that was a really quick transition. He wakes up, she's on a plane, and I was like, "Wow."
Yeah, I mean it's such a long issue, and then they're like, "No, we don't have time for this part."
Yeah, it was very strange to me. Yeah, but I mean, they needed to set up the next shot. It makes sense because the very next page sets up more of what Paul Kent was talking about, so it makes sense. But it was very abrupt, I thought. Yeah, so
yeah. So the shot here on this page is very similar to in Superman 1 when we've got like mommy look there's a guy running by the train scene and it's like Lois Lane. It feels like an allusion to that, but it's on a plane, so I almost wish it was like on a train that she was traveling back to Metropolis.
That'd been cool.
Because that shot is very similar, and they're like, oh, there's tons of superheroes, but like maybe like it made me think of Clark. And then the next couple pages are all these like allusions to different people being saved by Superman types. Mm-hmm. And like one is clearly Bibbo, but some of the other ones aren't. And in fact, we get confirmation because we do see like the Superboy save of like the girl with like the headphones. And I can't remember if all these other shots are ones that show up in the actual first appearances of the Reign of Superman stuff, but like we're getting allusions to all the different types, including the really violent one, because like most of these are just like, oh yeah, no, it's Superman. Like, oh well, like he was gorgeous, like the one woman says, and it's like, oh well, that's interesting. The next two are like kind of fine. It's like, oh yeah, we like our building was on fire and Superman saved us. Cool. Oh, the nuclear power plant's going to go off. Okay, cool. And then yeah, Superman stopped this guy. I'm okay with the fact that he's dead now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear which one of these was Steel, because considering Louise Simonson is writing the Steel book. So if we're going to look at these four side by side, I think we can guess. So yeah.
We don't have to guess on any of these, really. It's obviously the Eradicator on the bottom.
Yeah,
the nuclear power plant's obviously Cyborg Superman. The fire is obviously Steel. Yeah. And Superboy's obviously the one that saves the jogger.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It goes for the hot chick.
Yeah. And then Bibbo saves the little girl.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But then with all of these like sightings of Superman, Lois is like, that's weird. And she goes to the statue, and Inspector Henderson's also there, and they go inside, and it's like, Superman's
Dun, dun,
the coffin is empty. He's back.
They literally
Sure.
they roll aside a stone door. This the Jesus comparisons have never been stronger. Like, it's crazy to me. Like,
But I ask you this. Did aliens from outer space who were living in our sewer system steal Jesus for a period of time on the day between the death and the rise?
there's literally a shroud in that coffin. Come on, man. I think it's funny that the first time his body disappeared, they're like, someone stole his body. And then this time they're like, no, he's definitely back.
Right.
It's not Cadmus just trying again.
Or is it?
Like, did they screen for additional secret passageways or anything? Because it's like, who knows how many secret doors there could be at this point.
If at first you don't succeed 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, maybe one of them will work out.
Yeah. And also, technically, it is someone who just stole the body again.
True.
Because that's the other part of it, which is like, spoiler for the reign of the Superman and the return of Superman thing. The Eradicator takes the body of Superman. It's not that Superman gets up out of his coffin.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I just love the certainty this time. It's just straight, oh, he's definitely back. No, there's no way it happened twice. Like,
right.
This arc is not continuing. He just got up.
There's no chance that the extremely interesting biological specimen that is able to do things that we thought was previously impossible, that a lot of people who have interest in just studying his DNA might have been kidnapped again.
Exactly. Yeah. So funny.
So, yeah, so that is World Without a Superman. And I think, it's an interesting, like, breather in between the big fight and then the much more eye-catching kind of stuff that happens with the return. It's nice just to check in with all the supporting cast, because when we move on to the next story arc, a lot of that supporting cast kind of shifts away, because we're going to focus on, like, the supporting cast for the respective Superman imposters. So here's a chance to be like, yeah, no, there's a big world that we've been building up, and like has always been a part of Superman. It's always been about him having a circle of people he works with and knows and works, and
yeah,
is friends with and all that. It
is kind of a pivot point for DC Comics as a whole. I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but DC changes pretty drastically very quickly after this. Becoming more 90s, adjusting to that, and again taking risks. People draw direct lines back to this from stuff like Bane breaking Batman's back and stuff like that, taking chances like that because this worked out so well. And so a lot of these side characters people might not know, because it's not like they're focused on in modern DC. That's kind of like the key to that. I thought was interesting was, I don't know a lot of these, but I'm really kind of a later Superman fan is why. So I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, this is a pretty important pivot point in comics in general, but especially DC.
Yeah. We'll talk about this when we get to the reign of Superman stuff, but I feel that each of those characters are supposed to be a commentary on the state of the comics industry that by the time we get to them. We talked about this when we were discussing The Death, where, Doomsday's design, everything about him feels in some ways like them making commentaries about like shifts that had started to occur. The fact that Louise Simonson, who was ousted by Rob Liefeld from working on New Mutants, is then working on this book, and we get, a big monster with giant shoulder spikes.
Yeah.
Feels very much like an Image reject.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to talk about Rob Liefeld. we'll be here a while if we do that. So.
But it certainly feels like the people who are working on Superman at this point are aware of the shift that has been occurring in comics and see what's coming, and they are trying to do the same thing that like the whatever happened to Truth, or What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, in the American Way, like the whole like we're going to do the Superman versus the elite kind of concept here, and be like, this is why it's bad to have a Superman that kills Eradicator. This is why like the morals of Superman are the thing that matters because of Steel, and like it does, like, being hip and cool isn't enough. Like, you have to have like something backing it. Like there's certainly stuff going on there, and like the characters who persist are the ones who are actual heroes and not the ones who are the deconstruction of it. But like a lot of books right now at the time that this is being published are like cyborg characters or characters with energy blasts. Like the Eradicator has a lot of like Mr. Majestic kind of qualities to him. And like, I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah. And I realize why all the writers are credited on the digital version is because there's a 3-page preview for each of the Supermen at the end.
Ah, okay.
So that makes sense. So each one gets a little like, I'm Superman moment, like, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, I think that's at the end of the Death book. I feel like we saw that before.
probably.
So maybe that's what I was thinking
Probably,
of. Yeah. But either way, this is such a weird little like subchapter in between it all. And it's like fun to like see it. It's fun to like be like, all right, well, what do you do in Superman when Superman is dead? Like, what kind of issue do you write?
Yeah, and I do think it's very interesting. I would compare it to after Captain America died after Civil War, and they did that amazing 5-part series, which was just the 5 stages of grief, and almost nothing happened in it, and it was all about, you know, people reacting, except this is the humans, whereas that one was how do the heroes react, and I do like the ground level of this one, and specifically, you know, the characters I've mentioned this entire time, but especially the Kents, seeing them react to that, it's very interesting because they're very compelling characters and they're a very important part of that mythos. So,
yeah, like I would argue that the only character you could do this with and have it have as much impact is Spider-Man. Like even Batman, like Batman supporting characters outside of like Gordon and like Alfred and then the Bat family. Like, yeah, there's a lot of characters, but like how many are going to like resonate the same way and how many feel like people on the ground? Like Spider-Man at least has the same, like part of it might be the newsroom aspect, whereas like, here's a bunch of our coworkers, but like Iron Man supporting cast has shifted out several times. Like Green Lantern supporting cast has shifted out several times. Like
the X-Men are all mutants.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, definitely. It probably is the one with the biggest, like, and most established human non-hero cast. So yeah, makes sense. Even Flash, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
because even Linda Park has powers now. So like, yeah.
Well, I mean, even so, like that's still a newer character that was like filling in a void that was previously Iris, and like like that's the thing. Like like what character has coworkers who we've been seeing stories with for as long as Superman? No one. Like Jimmy Olsen as like his pal, like they both work at the same newspaper and have been working together at this point for 50 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Spider-Man's definitely a good shout as the one that makes sense to me too. Yeah. Maybe no, he's not even close, but the only one I would even think would even pop in my head would be Daredevil, just because Foggy and Karen and, there's some, but it's not even to this degree. Yeah.
Yeah, like I would say those are his iconic supporting cast and have come back over time, but like they've been phased out too. Yeah. Like there's never been a run of Superman where Lois has been phased out completely.
True. Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, it's really interesting getting this moment of like, all right, we have this rich world and let's see how they deal with it all, and let's see the impact of Superman in his absence. Like how are people responding to it, and what are the positive things about Superman? I think you could skip this. Like I don't think there's anything that happens in this that wildly is going to change your understanding of the story. But at the same time, I think it is just a really nice, like cathartic experience of like going through the moments of grief with all these characters, especially like the Kent stuff, because that's so fucking strong. And Lois is also good, but like the Ma and Pa Kent of it all is like the big reason to read this book, because you're like seeing these like crazy moments of these two like super sweet people dealing with the grief of losing their son, which, even if you're a kid and not connected to the concept of mortality in the same way, it's still going to resonate with you in some regard because it's just so well written.
Yeah, it's really great. Unfortunately, like the idea of a world without a Superman is something I think DC's gone to the well too much with. But being that this really is the first one, it's a really interesting study when you compare it to things like 52, when it's world without Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, and the more recent run when he's stuck on War World and John Kent has to step in his place. I do think they come to that a little too often. Maybe it's because Superman is very powerful. He's an easy answer to a lot of questions. So he's a very tricky character to write. And but yeah, just this one is that first attempt to do it. And I think they really nailed it, especially, again, the supporting cast. I've always been a big Jimmy Olsen fan. So I love Jimmy as a character. And then obviously Lois, seeing Lana again, the Kents. It was just really cool to see that. And I think they did it as well as they could, especially the Louise Simonson issues. So, yeah.
Like, we're not trying to come off as biased, but like, I would say of the writing team, she's the one that has the best point of view specifically for this. You know, like when we were talking about the death issues, I didn't think that hers were as exciting as some of the others, but that's because she wants to deal with the people around, and she, like I said, she really likes the people on the ground. She really likes the people under the ground. Like she really cares about the people who are marginalized in society, and that's a theme that goes for a lot of the things she's worked on. Yeah. So it's really nice to see it here in this, like, you know, flagship book of DC Comics.
Yeah. I am trying to be biased. No, I'm just kidding. I honestly, if I met Louise Simonson, I'd start crying. I mean, just straight up. Like, I would just be like, I love you so much. But yeah, like I always bring it back to Power Pack, because her books in this remind me of Power Pack, because Power Pack is very ground level. Power Pack very much cares about civilians, and Power Pack very much handles real life problems. And I really, really liked that. And yeah, that's what her issues of this came off of. But I didn't dislike any of it. I just, it is much a story of two parts too. It's very much of the grieving. Oh, his body's gone. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of two parts, and I did greatly enjoy the first 4 issues by far the most. So,
J. Mike, any final thoughts?
Bibbo is MVP of this whole story.
Yeah.
I guess if with the new reboots and things coming to the DCEU, they don't have him included in there, I'm going to be very disappointed. But this is a great grounded story, like we said earlier. It focuses more on the people and the environment that people also always forget about with all the Superman mythos stuff. Everyone always forgets about like all the stuff that goes around, like Inner Gang, the people that he goes in. Turban, I forgot the other detective's name. I forget her name all the time. But,
Maggie Sawyer.
Yeah. Like, all that stuff's always included in there, but people forget about that entire angle. So it's a good time. It's a good chance to see all that stuff integrated into the story. And that makes it hit a little bit differently. For MVP, though.
Word.
Bibbo's fun. Well, he is a fun part of the Reign of the Superman stuff. So he will continue to be MVP for a bit more of our reading. But yeah, Keith, I am so glad I was able to twist your arm to come on for this one.
Of course. Hey, you never have to twist my arm. I'll always give you an opinion. You just might not like the opinion.
That's true.
No, you were thankfully you were kind enough to invite me on to an episode that didn't actually feature Superman. So thank you for that. No, I'm kidding. I like Superman. I just like Supergirl more. That's all it is. So
yeah. Even the Supergirl.
Man. Give me 2 years. Give me 1994. Give me Peter David. We've talked about that. Then we'll start talking Supergirl. So, yeah,
this is such a weird era for that character.
They also, I don't know if you know this, they did the News Times special about the death of Superman. They printed it. You can find it. Oh, yeah? You can find it on DC Unlimited, and it's literally a magazine. It's great. Like, and it uses the photos and everything, so it's really cool. So I just wanted to throw that out too.
Yeah, this was such a big publicity thing at the time. Like, it was in the news. I was so aware of everything, even though I wasn't reading Superman monthlies at this point yet.
And it's cool because it references other things. Like, there's a letter to the editor about how Guy Gardner's a terrible person, basically. So, like, yeah, it's really great. So, yeah.
Oh, Guy Gardner. Back in the day when Wizard did a poll when the Morrison JLA was announced and they were going to expand the rosters, they were like, what leaguer would you not want to have included on the team? And he was the write-in and won it by a milestone. Like,
that's the one where with Superman Blue, right?
Well, eventually the opening arc was the HyperClan, and he still hadn't gone blue yet.
Oh, okay.
But
because I remember the scene where they're around the table and they're like, who should we join? They're like, what about Guy Gardner? And then every other person's like, no. Like, and I just remember love that shot. So
yeah, fuck it, fucking Guy Gardner.
But anyways, yeah.
Anywho, so we will be back next time to talk about the death of, or pardon me, not the death anymore. We're done with the death. We will be back next time to talk about the return of Superman, specifically the reign of the Superman portion of the next chapter, because that's pretty big, so we're gonna have to split it up. So we'll be back for that. Keith, if people enjoyed your insight on why a Superman comic without Superman is better than a Superman comic with a Superman, where can they find you? What have you got going on?
You can find me on a pair of podcasts, but first of all, you can find me on Twitter at WHI Podcast Keith. That is reference to my first podcast, We Have Issues. That is our weekly comic book podcast. We release it every Saturday morning where we review every comic that comes out, or at least it feels like it, every Wednesday. So make sure to check that out at WHI Podcast on Twitter. And again, myself, WHI Podcast Keith. You can also find our other show, Jukebox Vertigo, at Jukebox Vertigo, which is a certain POV joint. And make sure to check it out once again at Jukebox Vertigo. That is our musical playlist building podcast. It comes out bi-weekly on Mondays. Every episode we have a randomized category, and we have ourselves, our co-host Amanda, and usually a guest or two to come in, build a playlist based around that category. It's a lot of fun. We always look forward to doing it, and we're going to start having a lot more certain POV guests, and I'm very excited about that. So make sure to check that out for both of them, because I believe this is coming out before the end of December, you said, right?
Yes, somewhere in there. It's either right before the first week of January.
If it is still December, I want to go ahead and tell everybody, please vote in our end of the year awards. Both of those Twitter accounts have the pinned tweet is the ballot, and you can vote for the best comics of the year and the best music of the year, respectively. Our awards are called the Rimmies, which is Recognition of Excellence in Media's Multiple Industries, which is an acronym that I came up with because I thought it was funny. So make sure to check out the vote there. We nominate everything, but you vote for the winners. So me and Josue, my co-host, we vote once each, and we step away and let you guys take over. And we have a lot of votes, and there is a Superman adjacent book that is winning one of the categories, and I'll just give that spoiler. And it's doing very, very well, and I have my fingers crossed. So
excellent. Yes. So confirming that this will be out before the end of the month. It's going to be dropping on the 29th.
Okay, good. It closes at the 31st on midnight. I stay up and do it every year. So
yes. So listeners, go vote right now. Like literally right now, go vote for when this drops. And force them to deal with even more votes because they have so many votes relative to previous years.
I'm trying to see if I can download the results, and because I get IP addresses for each one, and maybe get rid of some bots because I'm worried we had a couple bots. But it doesn't. No one category is so out of control that I thought that's definitely a bot. So we'll see.
Yeah. So go all check that out, and then swing on by certainpov.com where you can find other great shows. Like, Jukebox Vertigo is a great show, but there are so many great ones. So check all those out. In the meantime, if you would like to hear our insights on anything comic related or not related, J-Mike, where can they find you and follow you online?
For however long left I'm on Twitter, it's JMike101. You can find me there. I post funny things sometimes, occasionally. I try to respond to cases as much as possible.
Yeah, this is such a weird window of time for this recording because we're all like, where's the party going to be at? I don't know. Like we'd all gotten used to being like, yeah, Twitter's like a safe place to plug like that. We don't need to worry about that thing. And now the upheaval. But yeah, for the moment, Twitter, best place, band pod to find us. Yes. Also Hive and Mastodon, I've got stuff set up. It's I don't know how to explain Mastodon because I don't understand Mastodon. Someone needs to explain Mastodon to me, but I did make a username there. But Hive and Twitter, you can find me at Keith Sagan. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Men of Steel Pod. You can find us. Well, you can find the rest of our stuff at certainpov.com. So go there, find a link to our Discord, find our shit up on the YouTube channel at Certain POV Media on YouTube. We've got both clips from this show. We also have our Superman analog series. So those are fun. You should check those out. I recently, as of us recording this, did a bunch of Supergirls, including Matrix. And if you're like, what are we talking about? Why are they saying Supergirl's a pile of goo? Go look at that because I try to explain it. It's weird. But yeah, we'll be back next time talking about the reign of the Superman with our buddy Zach Herring, who hasn't been on in a little while, but we're excited to have him back. But otherwise, just stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a certain POV production. Our hosts are J. Mike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon. Woo!
Woo, lost the energy right there.
All right, Josue, let's go through our new Comic Day stack. We have a lot to review.
I know. Maybe we've gone too far.
Well, let's see. Marvel, of course. DC.
I Got Image, Dark Horse,
Black Mask, Boom, IDW.
Aftershock, Vault, of course, Mad Cave,
Oni, Valiant, Scout.
Magma, Behemoth.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, all we need now is a name for our show. We need a name for our show about reviewing comic books every week. Something clever, but not too clever.
Like a pun? It's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it's something that seems funny at first, but we might regret later on as an impulsive decision a few dozen episodes in.
Yeah, we'll think of something.
Join Keith and Josue for We Have Issues, a weekly show reviewing almost every new comic released each week, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.